We've all been there. We've all been there. Saying not very nice things to Brianna Wu on Twitter. We've all been there. Very odd stuff here. Very strange stuff happening here. Like, if you ever catch her on a lie, or you point out that she's wrong, she'll always say, no, you know what? Good point. Crazy that DeadDomain is actually trying to pick apart harassment claims here. Very dangerous game trying to dispel someone's harassment claims. What an awesome and defamation-free way of saying that. But I think we all know what we're thinking right now. Oh, that's such a crazy thing to say. What? What? Dude, what? I'm giving you a 360. Off. Okay, let's get into this. So, DeadDomain, well-known, 127,000 subscriber, trans video essayist, breadtube YouTuber. They did a video on a guy called Synthetic Man a long time ago. He's a gaming YouTuber who's a giga incel and just sits there ranting about blacks and women to himself on his stream while playing like old Bethesda games. It was quite a good video. I actually reacted to it. I uploaded my reaction. So I'm high hopes. This person has impressed me before with videos I didn't think would be as good as they were. So when I hear that they're making a Brianna Wu hit piece, I was very excited. And I got even more excited last night because I saw on Twitter our favorite streamer, our absolute favorite streamer, Keffals here, said, I've spent years as a fellow target of online hate, so I deeply empathize with Brianna. We were once close, but her behavior, especially over the past year, has crossed too many lines. I can't stay silent anymore. I've been working with DeadDomain on a video exposing what's been really happening. Leaked signal messages, emails from her lawyer, and disturbing things behind the scenes. It's time people know the truth. Also, there's a fly. There is a fly trapped in this room. It's been in here all evening. I can see it again. It's going to annoy the f*** out of me. I can tell it already. I've tried to hit it a couple times. I just couldn't get it. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, I was super excited seeing this. New leaks on Brianna Wu about her lawyers and about her trying to sue people. That sounds awesome. That really does sound awesome, I'm not gonna lie. So, we're gonna take a look at this video. It's over 2 hours long. It's over 2 hours long, so hopefully it's good. Dude, you just saw that, didn't you? The fly is on the webcam. That's what that was. That just obscured the webcam for a moment. This is gonna annoy the f*** out of me.
I wish you to tell her, Venus, you take too many chances. You're too wild with people in the street.
This is one of the final scenes of Jenny Livingston's classic 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning, which explored the underground culture of New York drag scenes and the people in it. The woman here is Venus Extravaganza, a trans woman and performer and aspiring model who had also taken to sex work in the hopes of paying for gender reassignment surgery. In the film, she recounts narrowly escaping a violent...
We're gonna... This is BreadTube video essayist Fluff. This is like thematic dressing, almost. It's like thematic dressing. So I'm going to turn the YouTube video to 1.5 times speed and get through this as quickly as possible. Because all I care about is the Brianna Wu leaks and shit like that. That's all I care about.
Violent encounter with a man who discovered she was trans on a date. During the filming of Paris is Burning, Venus was found murdered. Her body was found on Christmas Day, and she had been strangled just a few days earlier in the Duchess Hotel. To this day, her killer has never been found.
Sorry,
I bring this up because
times.
Venus' story, despite taking place 3 decades ago, is eerily prescient. Anybody in the trans and wider LGBTQ community likely knows someone who has been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted for their identity, or even just who had to turn to sex work to make money. A precarious pursuit that endangers many trans people today. Now, what does this have to do with Brianna Wu? On January 3rd, 2025, Brianna Wu tweeted...
Okay, what does this have to... That's what I wanted to hear. Now I can put it back to normal speed.
A response to someone calling out a post where she decried progressivism as the reason for trans people's current political woes. Her response was, many trans women go into sex work because we have autogynephilia, and being objectified is erotic for us. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this post was Venus. I thought about all of my friends who had been turned away from jobs because they were trans, who had been forced into sex work by circumstance, or other people who had survived only on it and who have been stripped of their dignity because sacrificing that...
Okay, wait. All right, guys, I understand a lot of you may be turning off right now. A lot of you may be, like, shutting off because this started in a very gay way. I think the point that's being got at here is that Brianna Wu seems to either project onto other trans people her own experiences, or just basically cede the ground to what they would see as, like, transphobes. Just cedes the entire ground and basically without any fight just says, yeah, trans people are like these weird sexual degenerate freaks. Yeah, you guys are right, actually. And it's sort of like it's totally selling out on the group, if you know what I mean. It's like if some black guy was just like, yeah, all blacks are criminals, actually. Like, went up to the KKK and was like, yeah, all blacks are criminals, actually. They do be raping white women. And like, that's like the sort of... I think that's what we're sort of going for here, I think.
Dignity was the only way they could sometimes eat the 1 or 2 meals they got a week. And I bring up this decades-old documentary not just because it's personally resonant, but because it shows how long this kind of thing has been an accepted part of queer and trans life.
Yes, there is a fly stuck in it. Okay, this can be a consistent thing. There is this fly. I can see it next to my monitor right now. I've tried to hit it several times. I've been unable to. I'm not gonna, while I'm just sat here on camera, start waving around, attacking a fly. I'm not gonna make a fool of myself attempting to swat the fly. I can see it's annoying the fuck out of me. I'm not gonna make a fool of myself attempting to swat the fly. So I may turn my camera off in a minute and attempt to get the fly. But for now, you're going to have to bear with me, okay? You're going to have to bear with me.
Isn't new for people who know and maintain community with other trans people. This reply, like most things Brianna says about trans people with such authority, is not based in fact or even really in her personal experiences. Unless you want to say she finds the idea of being objectified personally titillating, which is certainly a valid reading of what she says here. For the record, I don't think that's what she's getting at, but it would tie into a very common theme in Brianna's work, which is a consistent fetishization and reduction of what it means to be a woman, something we will examine later. Brianna likes to play at being an authoritative voice for the trans movement. In the last few years especially, she has turned away from progressivism and has attempted to engage right-wing and even far-right voices, courting TERFs, all in the name of being a reasonable voice.
I'm gonna get this fly, okay? This is gonna... Guys, bear with me. The video's doing setup, okay?
Voice for the trans community. Something nobody asked her to do, but she's still taking it upon herself. Now, I want to be open and say that because I had so many questions from my time looking into Brianna's history, I did attempt to reach out to Brianna multiple times through multiple avenues to sit down and have an interview. She had blocked me on multiple websites, and I'll be honest, that is completely fair considering some of the not very nice things I've said about her. Mostly...
We've all been there. We've all been there. Saying not very nice things to Brianna Wu on Twitter. We've all been there. Whether it's gamers in 2014 or trans people in 2025, we've all been there.
Those were reactions to what I saw as her abdicating the responsibility to help other trans people instead of her throwing other identities like non-binary people, like myself, under the bus. I can't blame her for not being open.
I was using my tobacco pouch as like a, you know, I was getting like a little bit of leverage, like a little bit of whip on it. And I've hit it a couple times. And it sort of seemed to stagger away, you know, like half flight. And so I can only assume it's dropped down somewhere now. Like, you know, when it like... You know, when they like fly limp, it was doing that. So I can only assume it's... I got it to some extent. Anyway, let's
the discussion. I maintain that I earnestly did want to hear her take on most of the things I discuss in this video, and if she watches it and wants to sit down and have a convo and set the record straight, my DMs are open to you, Brianna. That being said, she did respond to some other folks who asked for an interview in my stead by labeling me a weirdo degenerate. Again, no hard feelings, Brianna. I don't like you either, and I don't want to be your friend. But I also at least try to be a little fair in my assessment of people, and just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean I don't want to depict them honestly, which is why I found it somewhat annoying that she would say this Within a few hours of planning,
Okay, sorry. So what's this?
Brianna, I don't like you either, and I don't want to be your friend. But
You should totally do an interview with DeadDomain. I don't talk to weirdo degenerates. Dude, what? I mean, first of all, yes, you do. Like half your friends. So, let's clear that up, first of all. Like, you helped run Progressive Victory for a time. You absolutely do talk to weirdo degenerates. Who did they have? Vosh? Nominal Naomi? That Cirrus? Transgender VTuber? Destiny? Wick? Yeah, she does a podcast with Taftash. Sorry, you don't speak to weirdo degenerates. You run a podcast called Dollcast, Brianna. You run a podcast called Dollcast, which is basically a trans slang word for like attractive trans person. Basically, it's like an AGP podcast. And you're sitting there saying, I don't talk to weirdo degenerates. You run an AGP podcast.
I also at least try to be a little fair in my assessment of people, and just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean I don't want to depict them honestly, which is why I found it somewhat annoying that she would say this within a few hours of platforming just
Hello, as part of my political project to give normal, non-degenerate trans women a voice, I have an announcement. If you're a weird sex freak claiming to be trans woman who announces that your freaky sex life constantly on social media and you come after me, I will not pull punches. I have no fucks to give. You people have spoken over us for far too long. We should have said how embarrassing you are ages ago. Dude, like, hot kettle? Hello? Where's my Brianna Wu folder? Who remembers this? Dude, I'm like retarded. Oh yeah.
These were the death threats. You and Frank live at the ass until you bleed. The fucking feminist asshats. You're mutilated.
For the record, it's not.
Bar, and I'm coming to your house so I can shove it up your ugly feminist cunt. I'm going to rape your filthy ass until you bleed, then choke you to death on your husband's tiny Asian penis. How's that for terrifying, you stuck-up cunt? I'm sick of you fucking feminist asshats. You're mutilated.
For the record, it's not tiny.
Okay.
I just feel like I need to defend myself in some little way here, because people have been saying that, and that is
This is such a classic.
acceptable.
This is such a classic,
I'm
man.
sorry,
You
Frank.
can continue.
Yeah, okay. Your mutilated
Also untrue.
Your mutilated corpse will be on the front page of Just.
Absolute classic there. Absolute classic.
dickheads like Lior Sapir or Richard Hanania. See, she placates these figures by essentially saying they're right that some trans people are evil and are grooming kids, but not all trans people, not the transes like Brianna.
Okay, no
And
gross
as
shit in
I'll
chat.
show,
That's just nasty.
This is
That's
just
grim.
the latest
I don't
in
hear
a
that
long
shit.
line of what sure
I'll read
look
that
like
shit.
shifting grifts for Brianna Wu. During her time in the spotlight, she has had many titles, from congressional candidate to game developer to artist, question mark citation needed, and at every step of her journey, she has managed to claw her way to slightly more relevancy, leaving a long list of enemies in her wake. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words. I want to be as clear as possible why.
Is this my video desyncing or is this her desyncing?
Wake. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words.
It's her
I want to be as
desyncing.
clear as possible why I took on this project. If there's a thesis to this video, it's this. From everything I've found, from all the information available to me, and that I've heard from firsthand sources, Brianna Wu is a volatile liar and a fraud, and should have no future in any kind of political analysis or creative endeavor.
Wow.
Let alone
Who could have guessed? Who could have guessed? Surely no one has said this before.
representing any group of people. Because there are so many concurrent themes running in her story, this video will kind of be all over the place by necessity. There's no way to talk about the totality of Brianna's various controversies without jumping between them to show the decades-long patterns of her behavior, but I promise, it's all leading to the overall point: Brianna Wu should never be taken seriously by anyone. I haven't just trawled through old forums and found some dirt. I've spoken with several anonymous sources that knew her, interacted with her directly, and even worked with or under her. None of them had very nice things to say, by the way. In fact, most people I've talked to who worked with Brianna don't seem to. Brianna Wu is not a genuine person. I know this because I've seen how she acts in private, where she often plays the role of a mean girl, talking shit about others, often over their...
So let's see this. It's not like we didn't make shitloads of public mistakes. Hell, Zoe's Kickstarter stuff was a legit scandal. Zoe's Kickstarter. Who is that? Which Zoe is that? It's not fair. Maybe other people can't see it, but I do. Aaron Reed, Alejandra, both unfollowed and don't interact with me anymore. I lost so many connections. So that's, this is Keffals, I believe, seething that Erin in the Morn, who won an award for journalism despite being, from what I could see, not entirely honest and pushing the whole totally reversible thing about puberty blockers. Erin in the Morn and Alejandra Carabello, or whatever her name is. It was didn't she get banned from Twitter or something? I consider you a friend, so I'll just say this. I support Alejandra, but she is widely considered toxic by everyone I know. The last call I had with her, she was shitting all over another friend for reasons that seem both stupid and petty. She's constantly begging me for retweets. Erin is the least toxic of Liz Fong Jones' club, but she's cut from the same cloth. What?
Private, where she often plays...
Dude, this is like KF. We have a fucking field day with shit like this, man.
The role of a mean girl, talking shit about others, often over their appearances or their optics rather than any kind of principled stances.
Jones. I can hear
people
Josh
she will
Moon
publicly
fucking
claim to
himself
ally
right
herself
now.
with, like,
Liz Fong
Destiny,
Jones?
aren't safe from her insulting
Liz Fong
them
Jones mentioned.
when she thinks nobody else is watching. Another example is the time she speculated about Shoe on Head being the victim of assault. Or, as I'll show later, how she has often attempted to hire people to create dossiers on who she deems her political...
Okay, so what's this?
Often attempted to hire people to create dossiers on who she deems...
Oh, 5k to 20k is how much campaigns charge for a book, which is basically a dossier. I'm not expecting full-time work like that. But I'll say down. What for reason would you deliver for 3k a month? But one good, deeply outsourced story. Deeply resourced story would be fair. Would be banging on the door, just good faith efforts.
Political enemies. But this is going to be a long video, so stash that one away for later. And I have evidence for everything I'm saying, by the way. She seems to only care about optics, not right or wrong, which is probably why her opinions have shifted over time as she makes her broad pivot to being a dollar store Blair White. Additionally, I've had several people share their DMs with me from Brianna and stories of how she has attempted to bully...
Okay, I have to look. Like, I half don't want to spoil myself, but I just have to... Did any of my debate get used? I'm gonna be so upset if it didn't. I bet this DeadDomain doesn't want any association with anyone. Dude, that's so fucked up.
Force them into stepping into line, particularly in recent years as she's taken it upon herself to represent that reasonable trans population. Some of these I will also share later in the video. These are just some of...
Want to hear herself so bad? Yeah, I want to hear myself so bad.
...facets that will pop up throughout what can loosely be called a career. Like I said, it's going to be all over the place, and as a result, this video will be filled with more callbacks than a Marvel Phase 5 writer's room.
Some uncanny arguments are made, though.
She is incredibly thin-skinned, talks authoritatively about things she has very little or no knowledge of, blatantly lies about her experience and credentials, and lashes out...
It's okay, I'll just sit here, and every time there's a point brought up that I pressed her on, we'll pull up my debate, and I'll sit here and I'll watch myself and say, wow, wow, I did such a good job pressing on that. Wow, I did such a good job pressing it there. Wow. What an amazing clip. Wow. What a good job I did.
Anyone who might challenge her. People have spent the last 3 years or so asking why she's so suddenly pivoted to the right. But the reality is, this is who Brianna has always been. While my other deep dive investigative pieces have spent ample time disproving the conspiracies and lies spread by people like Matt Walsh or Synthetic Man, I have far less of that to do here. That's not to say Brianna isn't a liar. She is, and I'll be debunking some of her talking points accordingly. But the real evidence...
So, yeah, guys, I'm going to be right. I did just see the flag in a second ago.
...isn't in her worldview. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite. Brianna Wu constantly shows just who she is by her lack of any ideology aside from being a desperate, attention-seeking grifter. The first...
Okay, so we're starting with the university stuff. I will standing ovation this video if there is any attempt to corroborate or prove the story from the old University of Mississippi forums where someone says that pre-transition, Brianna Wu had a racist meltdown in the student newspaper office or whatever. Please, dude, Bug, you're in for a treat. Oh my god, let's go. She had a racist meltdown in the student newspaper office because they wouldn't take a comic or something. So she started ranting about like sand ends and ragheads or something and going crazy.
Things you know about Brianna Wu.
Please tell me she's like interviewed someone or something and we've got like a bunch of info. Please, I'm begging. Wait. No, DeadDomain might be. No, you're crazy. No, DeadDomain is crazy. I can literally see pre-transition photos in the preview where I'm skimming. Dude.
She never had much to worry about in life. When she was 19, she went to Millsaps College, only to drop out to found an animation company that, like her college endeavors, was funded by her parents to, as Wu would attest later, the tune of over $200,000. The animation studio was known as Socially Unconscious Productions, and we will talk about it more in a little bit when we discuss Brianna's art and how she's lied about that over time. These aren't just random assertions, by the way. Much of this Wu has talked about in her various interviews with the media, from an interview piece on Inc.com in 2015. Quote, "At Ole Miss, Wu studied journalism and wrote for the Daily Mississippian, but she never graduated. She left school the first time to start her own video animation company, came back, and dropped out for good in 2001 after getting swept up in the excitement surrounding George W. Bush's election as president.
Chill.
Her parents were big donors, and they got her a ticket to an inauguration ball. That led to a stint working in Washington, long enough to become disillusioned with Republican politics, as well as dangerously dependent on Ambien, a sleep aid. Her parents, in the final act of support, brought her home to Hattiesburg and paid for a bed at Pine Grove, where Tiger Woods would later be treated for sex addiction." End quote. She's also publicly posted pre-transition pictures that confirm her identity as the person we're about to hear stories on. Now, I don't really care if someone ambles through college to find their direction in life. I did it, plenty of people do, regardless of economic bracket. I'm also not interested in talking about Wu's time in rehab. The reason I included the full paragraph was to talk about her lifelong links to Republican electoral politics, because that is going to come up later. The real problem is that despite not graduating, many interviews in the future would regard her as a graduate from Ole Miss, even her own website claiming she graduated from there. But there isn't really much of a record of her actually finishing that degree. And on her LinkedIn account, for example, it says she attended from 2003 to 2008 and majored in journalism and political science. Her LinkedIn bio currently reads, quote, "Brianna Wu is a software engineer, entrepreneur, and outspoken advocate for women's rights. One of the most prominent women in technology, Brianna founded her first $250,000 startup at 19. In running for U.S. Congress, Brianna is working to bring a new generation of voices and values to Washington." And already you can see some of the aspects of Brianna that will become recurring themes in her story, namely depicting herself as far more qualified than she actually is, saying she's a startup founder at 19 without mentioning that said startup was shuttered and had nothing to show for the effort. Also pursuing journalism and
no one's made these arguments about Brianna Wu before, guys. No one's ever said this about Brianna Wu.
It's something to note moving forward as she shows a shocking amount of acumen for
new information.
Brianna likes to talk about her time in college as a reporter, and there are articles written under her name before she transitioned to verify this. She worked at the school newspaper covering school newspaper things, but according to later forum posts, she would depict this as being on a crime beat. Maybe she did cover crimes at some point. I wasn't able to find any articles to back.
So this is being on the crime beat, according to Brianna Wu. Ooh. What's that name? Millsap students were accosted in a strong-arm robbery last week outside Fields Cafe on the corner of Farish and Griffith Streets. Although no one was seriously injured, one of the students was punched in the head. Among the stolen items were credit cards, a small amount of cash, and a wallet. Jackson police failed to respond when students called to report the robbery initially, which caused students to drive back to campus and report the assault to campus police. Okay.
Back that up.
Look, Mark, you know this. You just showed that heartbreaking TikTok at the, the video at the beginning of this. That 3-year-old girl on the
Dude,
ground.
this
That
debate
breaks
was
my heart.
awful.
I got my start in journalism, like covering, police successes in Mississippi, which is very racialized.
Brianna
I got my start in journalism covering police excesses in Mississippi because she wrote one article about the police failing to respond quickly to a crime. Dude, what?
had always been interested in being an artist and tried to get a comic she was writing into the local paper, and according to some forum gossip, when she was denied, she blew up at the teacher and person who ran the newspaper, calling them both slurs.
Can we be specific here? Is this rag one and sand? Yeah, can we be very specific with what she's accused of saying here? Yeah, I didn't go into this because it is just like a claim on a forum post. But, I mean, I don't know if DeadDomain has done any more work on this.
And person who ran the newspaper, calling them both slurs. Namely, calling the teacher a sand N-word. Now,
Yeah, I believe
want to
it.
tread very carefully here because there's very little to go on
I couldn't prove it, I would believe it, but I can't prove it.
verifying this incident, but I do think this kind of meltdown, taking offense over her artistic ability, and the fact that she did work for the newspaper are all entirely compatible with Brianna's trends of behavior sense and line up with the timeline of her career.
Yep.
Particularly the anti-Arab slur. While she might not be slanging such harsh language anymore, she's still blatantly racist towards
I just saw some Palestinian kids throwing rocks at a dog. They're trying to stone a dog to death. These fucking terrorists.
Palestinian people. The first time I met her, I was the opinion editor at the Daily Mississippian, and I turned to see this creepy fuck standing behind me. I shook her hand, and she pulled away, saying, "Ow." She then explained she'd broken her wrist in a bicycle accident.
Dude, this story is literally like I saw Brianna Wu in a Tesco the other day. Oh, like you're doing right now? It's it's that story. It's just that story.
Hand, and she pulled away, saying, "Ow." See this creep. The first time I met her, I was the opinion editor at the Daily Mississippian, and I turned to see this creepy fuck standing behind me. I shook her hand, and she pulled away, saying, "Ow." She then explained she'd broken her wrist in a bicycle accident that had almost killed her and given her amnesia. She explained that she wanted to be a columnist, and she had previously worked for George W. Bush in the White House, but she had since realized how R-slur and evil all conservatives were. About this time, my phone started ringing, and I politely ignored it while I talked to this girl. Then it rang again and again until I answered. It was the managing editor, who had ducked behind the front desk and was whispering, "Stay calm and don't react to this, but this girl isn't supposed to be here. She has a restraining order. Get rid of her." By this point, I was concerned that this girl might knife me at any moment, so I told her to write 3 columns and that I'd evaluate them and get back to her on whether she could write for me.
I like that DeadDomain has retrofitted all the female pronouns here.
I'm still proud of my ability to remain poised and convincingly pretend that the Daily Mississippian had any fucking standards. Turns out, a year prior, she'd come in wanting the Daily Mississippian to run a comic strip she had been doing. When she was told they weren't interested, she flipped out. She called one of the workers a fat dyke, and when Dr. Husani came to her defense, she called him a raghead and sand N-word. They got a restraining order to keep her away from Farley, but when they moved to Bishop, it no longer applied, and she was actually able to weasel back into working for the SMC. Here, we see several pieces of corroborating evidence with Brianna's own stories later. Things that are incredibly specific, like working with the Republican Party, which, again,
look, this
Brianna
is just a build up. This is history. Okay, this is Brianna Wu history.
Later interviews. So with these pieces of the puzzle, I feel pretty comfortable saying this did happen. And before transition, Brianna did go on a homophobic and racist rant. And right now you might say, well, that's not a lot of evidence. And you're right, I'm taking a little bit of this on faith, but having spent as much time as I have now studying Brianna, I can say this absolutely falls within the realm of her regular behavior and how she continues to act even today. So by the end of this video, I think you'll probably agree with me on this one. And plus, you'll be shocked to learn this kind of outburst and homophobia would come back later in her life. Additionally, there are pieces of art from her time in college when she was crafting this comic strip called Election Eve that, while made under her dead name, the same name cited in the forum gossip, is in the same style and even shares similar designs with Revolution 60, Brianna's eventual sole video game creative credit. Particularly the characters Holiday and Minuet.
The fly is still around.
Brianna's
less aggressive
work.
at the moment.
These comics and the artistic similarities further cement Brianna as the same person mentioned in...
We're going to come to an agreement, okay? So we're going to come to an agreement. We're going to make this work. He's less aggressive. He just stays away from the camera and the monitor. I won't have to see it, okay? Stay the fuck away from me, and we'll be fine.
The forum posts. Mind you, these posts were idle gossip years before Brianna came any kind of notable political or game industry figure. Socially Unconscious and Election Eve aren't really notable except for how poorly they were received, with the flat jokes often depicting offensive stereotypes and not making much sense, at least according to the mail-in section of the college newspaper. Thanks to Andrea James at Transgender Map for help with these sources, by the way. And speaking of her brief comic strip writer, Socially Unconscious and Election Eve aren't really notable except
Dude, I haven't even seen like half this art before.
With the flat jokes often depicting offensive stereotypes and not making much sense, at least according to the mail-in section of the college newspaper. Thanks to Andrea James at Transgender Map for help with these sources, by the way. And speaking of her brief comic strip writer stint, I can't really talk about this era of Brianna without acknowledging her probably made-up girlfriend, Lauren Malovey, in 2001. During her time with Socially Unconscious, Brianna then pre-trained...
Oh, yes. There is a trend of Brianna seemingly making people up, making up people that don't exist, that are in her life. I hope DeadDomain goes into that. You can't. It's very difficult to prove a lot of this stuff, because obviously you can't prove someone doesn't exist. It's very hard. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that suggests that there are several people Brianna has just made up that just never existed.
Transition was writing her comic.
Sometimes to explain actions that she has taken, and then she's like, that was someone else actually, and that person isn't real.
Election Eve with Malovey apparently
very little evidence suggests they do exist.
The art style is already pretty distinctive and similar to Brianna's own, so keep that in mind.
I think there's this Lauren Malovey, and then there's someone who she claims worked at her game development studio that apparently just doesn't exist. But I don't know. I don't know. I didn't put that stuff in my video, I don't think.
Malovey never posted a picture of herself, but blog posts exist on the Socially Unconscious website claiming she and Brianna were partners and in love. Curiously, there are posts under Malovey's name, like product reviews circa 2004.
Oh my god.
The way it's written is notably similar to Brianna's own assertive and...
Evening all.
Was that a stream elements or... Thank you, Heck Fury. I think I only just came through because I switched thing. Yeah, I'm gonna grab coffee, okay? I'm still listening though.
Casually abrasive style, and internet sleuths would later discover the only address from anyone.
Wait, you're implying that Muhammad J. Slayer isn't a real co-worker, dude?
Malovey matched the same house as a pre-transition Brianna. Malovey is, as it turns out, also a Bond girl's last name, Cara Malovey from the 1987 film The Living Daylights. You'll notice that Brianna is a big fan of spy fiction, and you can see it in her art of women with all the updos and the go-go boots and bright, garish, skin-tight suits. It's like Austin Powers' Silent Hill. Then there's the evidence via Socially Unconscious's own website that Brianna publicly advertised looking for female models, citing Lauren being camera shy. Perhaps most damning is that after Socially Conscious Productions was shut down, Lauren Malovey seems to have almost entirely disappeared, which, as we would soon see, coincided with Brianna's transition. Now, I don't like speculating at what I can't prove, but as a trans person, I think this feels familiar to how a lot of people might try exploring their own gender behind the anonymity of the internet. I honestly don't care if Brianna made up an entire internet girlfriend to explore ideas around femininity and gender expression, which is kind of what it looks like happened here. Everyone's done internet cringe when they were younger, nobody was exploited and nobody was hurt by this, so I don't really care. And you might ask yourself, then why bring this up, especially when there's only anecdotal evidence to go on? Isn't it possible this Lauren Malovey just so happened to live at the same place, write similarly, draw similarly, and act similarly to Brianna, and then disappeared before Brianna transitioned? Come on. Come on. It is technically possible that there is someone named Lauren Malovey out there, but what makes Lauren notable, however, is how it's not the only time there would be compelling evidence that Brianna Wu would craft an identity or person on the internet to support her. So like most things in Brianna's story, we're going to come back to this later. Going back to the animation studio startup, Wu was given money from her parents to start. You may have noticed I mentioned she went to Millsaps and then referred to her going to Ole Miss. That's not an accident, it's because she was at Millsaps before Ole Miss, and it's here she would put out her first comics. A lot of stories from Brianna's time in college are hard to verify, not just because she hadn't transitioned yet, but because she constantly either lies or omits details about this time in her life publicly, despite some details leaking through in various interviews. And after internet weirdos on Kiwi Farms and 4chan began targeting her during Gamergate, she's gone to extensive lengths to try and bury certain aspects of her past, such as
I just got back. I think DeadDomain's giving a lot of charity with that whole, but you know, it's just exploring gender expression while pre-transition. It's like, okay. Yeah, if it was just once, I might agree with you. If it was just that one time.
Aforementioned racist outburst. But one thing is for certain. She came from a rich-ass conservative family who helped her through every difficulty in her early life, from rehab to funding her own startup when she was 19 years old. From a story titled, quote,
You can tell this is cribbed verbatim from the lolcow wiki without credit because it's not actually correct. Which part's not correct? Which part are you saying isn't correct?
Mess with Brianna Wu posted to Fiction Mania in 2006. She also mentions being able
I know a
to
lot of it
finish
is straight
laser hair
taken
removal
from
just 6 months
lolcow
into a
wiki.
transition, something that is prohibitively
Obviously so.
expensive for many trans women even today.
That's what I used for research too, so.
I don't need to even speculate that growing up rich affected Brianna because she's been open about it, saying in 2014 that her million...
The history of her time at university, which part was wrong? Which part did we get wrong here?
Come on. It is technically possible into her transition. She came from a rich-ass conservative family who helped her through every difficulty in her early life, from rehab to funding her own startup when she was 19 years old. From a story titled, quote, Don't Mess with Brianna Wu, posted to Fiction Mania in 2006, she also mentions being able to have finished laser hair
She went to
removal
Ole Miss
just 6
first, then
months into her
Millsaps.
transition, something that is prohibitively
again.
expensive for many trans women even today. I don't need to even speculate that growing up rich affected Brianna because she's been open about it, saying in 2014 that her millionaire parents affected her upbringing and outlook on the world. She was given $200,000.
To be fair, it's not just the lolcow wiki, because there's the a college transcript or whatever that Milo released is floating around, and that only shows University of Mississippi. Or Millsaps or whatever. I don't think it shows Ole Miss, does it?
To start an animation studio that eventually dissolved before producing any kind of product. If the aforementioned ad for a model to pose as Lauren Malovey is any indication, the studio's ambitions were to turn Election Eve into a movie, and were apparently working on a sequel novel before there was anything even released aside from the comic strip itself. The level of exuberant, blind, naive ambition would become another commonality in Brianna's saga. But that doesn't mean that Brianna didn't have something to show for her time in art, animation, and college. She has a long history of art with a, let's say, distinctive style. Now, I don't want to specifically make fun of anybody's art here. Art isn't easy.
You should.
But I do find several things about Brianna's art interesting, particularly how she draws and
like
very
fetish
explicitly fetishizes women's bodies. And by interesting,
dude, how is
draws
this not
and
just
very
fetish
explicitly...
art? Dude, this is just like fetish art. They're about to get fucking... This is just like hentai intro type beat. You know? Like what that robot doing? Why does it look kind of like a xenomorph too? It literally is like a xenomorph robot, isn't it? It's just with tentacles. Very odd stuff here. Very strange stuff happening here.
Fetishizes women's bodies. And by interesting, I mean, it's like I can tell a lot about a person and how she sees the world from it. Like that Jake Gyllenhaal character in the one movie he did with Wolverine. You know the one.
Picked up Claire 33 last night after your segment. You are lucky, it's super good.
Thank you. Thank you for the dono. I didn't see who that was, but I'm glad that you're enjoying Expedition 33. I almost completely fucked my sleep up last night because I couldn't stop playing it. I just got totally sucked in. It was rough. I still can't want to be playing it right now, to be honest with you. I beat the, did anyone beat the Chroma Abest on the overworld? That shit's fucking hard, man. I thought I should have done it later, but I just sat there and fucking, you know, tried it until I got it.
Much of her art depicts busty, rail-thin, leggy women, often in skin-tight or very little to no clothing. This is another trend in her work over the last 20 years. There's very little variation in the body types of women, or for that matter, the style in which they are written. Almost all of her characters are generically headstrong women, independent badasses who feel rooted in an outdated brand of Obama-era girl boss feminism.
Well, with the Chroma Abest, it's just like the attacks, once you figure them out, are just so easy to parry. All of them. Like, I mean, obviously I just dodged the ground spell thing. But literally, there's like the one where it jumps. I'm literally gonna get distracted on Expedition 33. But it jumps up in the air and does that attack where it like swings down on you. And if you just like wait until the blade appears, like the moment the blade appears, just press E. It's like instant, you parry it every time. It's just like the easiest thing to time. You literally just visual. Like there's a clear indicator. Okay, parry. It's just like the easiest thing ever. So I just sat there. I just like ground that entire fight out. Slowly worked his fucking health down.
Again, aesthetically, there are a lot of overlaps we can see with Brianna's inspirations, like pulpy spy fiction, specific anime and manga, Final Fantasy, and more. And yes, of course, we have to talk about the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. There's just no other way to describe it. This piece was apparently the cover for Cross...
No, the Picto system's awesome. That's like autism fuel for me. I'll just sit there and organize my Pictos fucking ages.
And yes, of course, we have to talk about the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. There's just no...
So explain like pirate software. I'm explaining like pirates. I'm saying that move is particularly easy to parry once you see the moment that you need to do it, because it is very clearly telegraphed, the window for parrying.
Other way to describe it. This piece was apparently the cover for Crossed Genres and was accompanied by this blurb from her husband Frank Wu in 2009. Quote, Brianna went to University of Mississippi, where a famous race riot took place. Thus the building is the Lyceum, where you can still see the bullet holes in the columns. As one of the
They're not all easy to parry. The hidden blade thing that the fucking catapults do is not easy to parry, and you are smoking crack if you pretend otherwise. It's not easy to parry. Anyway, we were looking at this.
Like that Jake Gyllenhaal character in the one movie he did with Wolverine. You know the one. Much of her art depicts busty, rail-thin, leggy women, often in skin-tight or very little to no clothing. This is another trend in her work over the last 20 years. There's very little variation in the body types of women, or for that matter, the style in which they are written. Almost all of her characters are generically headstrong women, independent badasses who feel rooted in an outdated brand of Obama-era girl boss feminism. Again, aesthetically, there are a lot of overlaps we can see with Brianna's inspirations, like pulpy spy fiction, specific anime and manga, Final Fantasy, and more. And yes, of course, we have to talk about the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. There's just no other way to describe it. This piece was apparently the cover for Crossed Genres and was accompanied by this blurb from her husband Frank Wu in 2009. Quote, Brianna went to University of Mississippi, where a famous race riot took place. Thus the building is the Lyceum, where you can still see the bullet holes in the columns. As one of the lone liberals on campus, Bree wanted to do her own commentary on it. So, we see Martin Luther King with a rocket, but it's okay because he's a Terminator. And we also see KKK members, but they're all sexy ninja girls in skimpy white outfits. And now that MLK is free at last from his fleshy shell, he's going to kick their butts. 60s girls in go-go boots and jetpacks fight alongside. Remember when I said she lacked political instincts?
Yeah, Brianna Wu was pioneering George Droid, okay? Brianna Wu was at the absolute cutting edge of Fentech.
Apparently studying political science. I'd like to present to the court Exhibit A. If I thought Brianna had any real understanding of political struggle, let alone MLK and his ideas around reactionary politics, intersectional movements, or really anything about civil rights, I'd say it would be disrespectful to slather the imagery of the civil rights movement in her knockoff manga pinup fetish art style. But I don't want to give her that credit for understanding those things to begin with. As seen in even more recent tweets, her understanding of racism,
big fan of this video right now. Big fan of this video. W-Trans, Brad to You video essayist.
Are constantly shown to be thin at best and virtually non-existent at worst.
Dude.
Now, we will talk more about Brianna's artistic output when we get to Revolution 60 and her stab at game development, but having touched on her various artistic exploits, I feel a need to examine Brianna's constant character self-inserts. These depictions of women aren't just something that she fetishizes, but it's also how she, I believe, to at least some extent, sees herself. Normally, I think...
What gave you that idea? Is it the slow morphing into a Revolution 60 character that she's attempted to do through plastic surgery over the last 10 or so years?
Things self-inserts is hack-level internet criticism. When it's leveled at game developers, it's almost always not true. For example, incidental passing similarities are bound to happen in art as an extension of the creator's inspirations and personality. But in Brianna's case, there's a lot of evidence that the characters she makes aren't just representations of her interests, but how she sees herself going through the world. Remember when I talked at the beginning about how Brianna says trans women enjoy being objectified? When I first heard that, it immediately felt out of touch with the reality of survival sex work, but the more I've learned about Brianna, the more it makes sense. She doesn't consider the perspective of others, but she does fetishize femininity herself. And it's not just femininity, but a specific brand of headstrong anime protagonist coolness. I have no other way to describe it, honestly. As an example, here's an article she would write during Gamergate. Just listen to how she describes herself and pay attention to the fixation she has on sports motorcycles, a recurring motif for many of the scantily clad women in her art. This section is a little long, but bear with me because this bit, written by Brianna herself,
it's literally the moment I turn my camera on. I haven't seen it in like 5 minutes.
With how she sees herself and goes through the world, and more importantly, how that just changes depending on her whims. Quote, "I'm late for a programming meeting with Maria. I don't have time to be stuck in Boston traffic. So instead of grabbing my car keys, I don black, skin-tight leather armor and leap onto my motorcycle. It's a 2009 Honda in racing red, something straight out of Akira. I've leaned into highway turns at 80 miles an hour, feeling nothing but speed, the air whipping all around me, and my thighs gripping at 212...
Wait, nega Brianna? Wait, what? Wait, what? Huh? Huh? What the...
engine for dear life. My emotional connection to this 410 pounds of fuel and metal is intense. Idling at a red light, I see a woman waiting to cross. She has my figure and looks to be my age. The frazzled look of motherhood is about her, disheveled hair and perpetual distraction. She's hunched over to hold the hands of 2 kids so beautiful that my heart gives an involuntary lurch, an instinct hardwired into my brain in ways I don't understand. It hits me hard as if this is an alternate reality version of myself crossing the street. A Brianna that had made drastically different choices. The woman notices me. Look at the girl on the motorcycle, she says to her children. Our eyes meet. I recognize my gray-blue shade in her eyes. I was adopted and had planned to do the same, but recently I've changed my mind. I wonder for the billionth time if the right decision is to concentrate on my job. I'm certain that if I had children, I would be failing at my job. I've hit my 30s, a period when it seems all of my friends suddenly have kids. That's a priority shift completely incompatible with goals. Startups require you to give it all or go home, routinely requiring long nights, longer weekends, and blood and toil. If you aren't willing to put in the hours, eager replacements are standing behind you. If I fail, the women I work with will all be out of their jobs. The light turns red. I release the clutch and twist the throttle, and my doppelganger and her children disappear in my wake. End quote. So we can pretty clearly see that anime influences seeping into Brianna's perception of herself and the real world around her. Her long-running fixation with sport motorcycles apparently tying into it, but don't miss out the vaguely fetishized description of her in skin-tight leather wrapping her thighs around an engine with an intense connection to the fuel and metal. This isn't written tongue-in-cheek, by the way. This is meant to be a somber reflection of a place and time in her life as a woman. I don't think this ever happened, by the way. I think it's another example of Brianna sensationalizing her life, something we are going to see much more of. She likes to craft this kind of elaborate narrative about something passively happening to her that also just coincidentally works to sum up whatever grand argument she's trying to making in whatever piece she's writing. And yet it's so ephemeral that there's no way to verify it actually happened. She just be saying shit sometimes. If you're familiar with Brianna's modern positions on being trans and trans rights, this also might seem at odds with what she says here. Nowadays, Brianna will go out of her way to say some dumb shit like, trans women are just boys that need hormones or we will break. And these arguments of hers are an effort to court favor with TERFs and broadly anti-trans or gender-critical commentators, mostly conservative. She now argues against trans people, quote, invading women's spaces, and argues in favor of essentially seeing trans women as fetishistic men, promoting no shortage of ideas that provably put queer people and trans people in danger. And she does all of this unironically, despite the fact that, as you can see
might lose us a bit here, might lose us a bit. We'll see. We'll see.
She spent several years, over a decade in fact, depicting herself as a biological woman and using that pretense to position herself as a voice on women's issues.
True.
I think I pass reasonably well, but when I go to the gym, I shower at home just because if someone can tell I'm trans, I don't want to upset them. I think women deserve the right to say, no, we don't feel comfortable with you in our space. So I would say to my sisters out there, I understand that it can be dehumanizing the way that we're treated sometimes. The way that TERFs talk to us is it's brutal. It is cruel. It is so mean, but we will get so much further with getting goodwill from the public, with humility and grace, and trying to get people.
That's what Brianna's all about: humility and grace.
Buy in, and for them to see our humanity, then we will.
Like, if you ever catch her on a lie, or you point out that she's wrong, she'll always say, "No, you know what? Good point."
In pieces like this and myriad Gamergate interviews and articles she would write, she never discussed her status as a trans woman, only depicting herself as someone who's always been a biological woman. Could this be because at each point in time, depicting herself a certain way was, at least in her mind, guaranteed to get her maybe a little bit more attention?
The term doll is a term made up by trans people to describe the ones that pass, basically. A doll is basically a passing trans woman. It's like a trans woman, but not just that. It has like a connotation of like, that they really focus on that. That they really focus on being attractive and passing.
For example, depicting herself as a cis woman during the perils of Gamergate, and now coming forward as a trans woman to lend credibility to her political arguments against other trans people. I'll let you decide as we dig more into Brianna, and specifically her long history of opportunism. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have a lot more to talk about before we get to Brianna's time in Gamergate, and the events that would give her the bigger spotlight she has always been chasing. Also notable for Brianna pre-Gamergate was her time spent on Susan's Place.
What do they call the ones that don't pass? Isn't it like Huns? Huns? Some shit like that, isn't it? H-O-N-S?
Where she was a moderator. I had no idea what this place even was before sifting through Brianna's past, but apparently it was a notorious forum that caters primarily to an incredibly outdated view of trans people, in particular medicalizing transness and trans identities as a disorder. Based on this archived post, Brianna was apparently banned from the forum in 2007.
Oh my god, this shit. The Susan's Place post. Oh my god. Okay, yeah. So Brianna apparently had accounts on this trans forum and was saying crazy shit on there and got banned and was in a bunch of beef on there.
Of trans people, in particular medicalizing transness and trans identities as a disorder. Based on this archived post, Brianna was apparently banned from the forum in 2007 after some kind of incident that was deemed unbecoming a moderator, and it appears the forum manager even said, quote, I had hoped to allow her to leave with whatever dignity she could, but apparently that isn't going to be allowed to happen. Though I couldn't tell what incident had occurred here. So, much like stories of her in college, we can see Brianna has a history of being abrasive and confrontational to anyone who even peacefully speaks out against her. It's actually kind of funny, half of Brianna's past wouldn't be identifiable as being her if it wasn't for the way she very specifically reacts to other people and criticism. We will see much more of this abrasive, commanding tone in the future, so by the end of this video, you'll definitely recognize her distinctive style of online interaction, which is to basically act like an authority figure on any given subject and belittle anyone who might challenge her, regardless of her actually being qualified in what she's saying, because most of the time she's not. There's also evidence on this forum of Brianna talking about trapping cis men as a trans woman and having sex with them without them knowing she's trans. This is obviously vile and dangerous, but I bring it up not to shame Brianna, but to throw another piece of evidence on the pile that she fetishizes transness, almost seeing femininity as a—
Like, how? How? Sarah, like, I don't understand. I don't get the logistics here.
a sexual descriptor first and foremost. When you realize this about Brianna, you understand a bit more why she so easily agrees with the Disprovian Blanchardian bullshit about autogynephilia, because she really does see herself that way. So she just reflexively thinks other trans women and trans people aren't really trans if they don't, but more on that later. Also, during her time on Susan's Place, she spoke often about how Christians were evil and oppressive, an understandable opinion because at the time she had likely been cut off from her family and was by this point, I think, living with her husband, Frank Wu. It's also worth bringing up the time she talked about having no sympathy for any detrans people. There are several other commonalities between—
Oh, cool. So when a trans woman rapes a guy, trans women in the general sense are the victim rather than the guy. Yep. That's how it works. I don't know if you know about this, Tuna Chip, but trans people are the ultimate victims. Everyone hates them so much. They're the ultimate victims. So anytime anything happens, it's really what you should always be worried about is how it's going to blow back onto the trans community. You know? It's like when a mass shooting happens, it's like, oh, the worst thing about this is how it's the terrible blowback it's going to have on the trans community.
At the time, she had likely been cut off from her family and was by this point, I think, living with her husband, Frank Wu. It's also worth bringing up the time she talked about having no sympathy for any detrans people. There are several other commonalities between Brianna in 2007 and her attitudes now. For example, her insistence on using the word transsexual other than transgender, which might just be a time she was in type of thing. I also want to take a little detour to go talk about her live journal entries from around these times, which also detail her—
pulling up the live journal.
Say,
Ain't no way.
Unhinged ideas.
Nah, ain't no way pulling up a live. Ain't no way pulling up a live journal. Nah.
Politics. Just listen to this shit. Quote, "Let me preface this blog by saying that I think gay rights are the preeminent moral issue of our time, the modern equivalent of slavery. It's one of the top 3 issues I vote on, and I fully intend to go demonstrate in Denver's Gay Pride Parade in 2 weeks. It bothers me deeply that 1/10 of America's population are treated like second-class citizens. That said, I think it's an error to see women's issues and gay issues as synonymous. I don't especially feel that gays are allies when it comes to women. I think we usually get along well, but I've occasionally felt that gays see us primarily as competition for the penis. When I..." Okay, no, serious. Okay. "When I watch drag queens, I can't help but feel insulted, as if that offensive cartoon is what they think feminine truth is. There are so many issues women have that gay men never have to think about. Our increased healthcare costs, equal pay issues, access to reproductive healthcare, and the threat of rape and violence. Concordantly, there are many gay issues that don't affect me. I've never had to worry that society didn't approve of my sexuality or marriage rights." Lots to unpack here. As I mentioned, we see her already depicting herself as a cis woman, not a trans woman. She's concocted this bizarre framework where gay men resent women as competition for penis, and then proceeds to say drag is a offensive cartoon that gay men think feminine truth is. That despite her actually making literal cartoon representations of how she saw femininity. Even in the previously mentioned 2006 Fiction Mania post where she recounts her first 6 months of transition, she essentializes femininity to what she saw as feminine traits she had pre-transition, like making food for an ungrateful partner or defining profanity in speech as a masculine trait. Quote, generally speaking, girls are nicer and much more cooperative. I find myself obsessed with the importance of always being nice to people, even people I disrespect. Part of female communication is coming to consensus rather than being dominant. This comes second nature with estrogen. Also, estrogen makes you live in your own world. I sometimes find myself oblivious to my immediate surroundings, concentrating on something as insignificant as a hair on my desk. Estrogen also makes me more reticent to say what I'm thinking because I understand more deeply how important it is to get along. And later in that same Fiction Mania post, quote, and although I might dismiss it, being a girl is a lot of fun. Makeup, nails, fashion, and exercise were all things I took to easily. It's fun to wear skirts and to have long hair, but it's also important to remember that's not what being a woman is about. It's also about the standards you hold yourself to. It's about your capacity to be weak when it would be easier to be strong. What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck, Brianna? Remember the MLK art and what I said, how she doesn't understand intersectionality and political organizations and movements? This is a lot like that in a lot of ways. Throughout her life, Brianna has seemed terminally unable to consider the struggles of others if they happen to coincide with her own. Instead of understanding political movements and structures as overlapping Venn diagrams of who is affected by what in different ways, she just seemingly wants her own little well-defined circle to claim as her own, regardless of if it pushes anybody else out. This is something she currently loves to do with non-binary folks and basically anyone she doesn't see as really trans. Again, this is a lot. We got a long ways to go. So it's safe to say, as far back as even the mid-aughts, Brianna was regarded as odd, abrasive, and even weird to and about other trans
guys.
people.
Now is a great time, actually. Let's do a quick show, guys. Let's do a quick show, okay? 478 people watching right now, 55 likes on the stream. Some of those 423 or so people, wouldn't mind please moving the cursor to the thumbs up and clicking it, or pressing the thumbs up on the mobile device. That'd be hugely appreciated. Now, if you want to take your support one step further, you can donate directly through the Stream Elements link in the pinned chat message. You can also buy a membership to the channel, gift a membership to the channel, gift a whole bunch of memberships randomly throughout the chat. Buy a super chat, which will highlight your message and read it on TTS, or buy a super sticker, which is a YouTube image or GIF that will be highlighted in chat, and I'll describe it to you. You can go to discord.gg/Kuihman, twitter.com/Kuihman, or reddit.com/r/Kuihman. Also, you can now watch on Twitch too, at twitch.tv/Kuihman. So make sure you head over there if you enjoy watching on Twitch for some reason. Okay.
Queer people. Now, I don't want to say Brianna still thinks this reductively about gender because, in fairness, that was 20 years ago, but I bring it up because I think it colors in some of the shades she approaches gender and identity in for later. On Susan's Place, we can, for example, go back and see her being real shitty about other trans people, essentially saying she doesn't want to hang out with other trans people because why would you hang out with trans women if you see yourself as a woman? Which is amazingly stupid logic, because if you see yourself as a trans woman, you shouldn't have a problem hanging out with any kind of women, you fucking dork. Even in places where she should be seeking community and understanding, like with other trans or gay people, she seems to have no interest in anything but setting herself apart. I wonder if that'll come back. It will. It will. But what I find most interesting here is how similar some of these ideas are to Brianna's current...
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be soy, but it does kind of... It does kind of cook from like the... from the lefty progressive angle, you know? What do you mean when you say things are maybe too much for us? I hope this isn't a queerphobic channel. I'm new, Lamau. It depends what you mean by queerphobic. It really depends how you define that.
Her-friendly turn. It's no surprise, right, that she would still be an abrasive, selfish person.
Unfortunately, I get the feeling, if you're the sort of person who's asking, is this queerphobic, you're probably the sort of person that's going to find it queerphobic. So it's just sort of like a bad first foot. Gonna be real.
The lives and existences of others, but that's not the part I find interesting. What I find interesting is how she would change her opinions in the coming years, being broadly supportive of a wider queer community. Like this Reddit post where she still claims to support non-binary people and calls them transgender. So either she changed her opinions between her early transition and then changed them back again, or she was simply aligning herself with what was then broadly progressive positions at the time. That time being when she was in the spotlight for Gamergate and than her political aspirations right after that. I mean, what are the odds she would change her opinions and or how she depicts herself multiple times in ways that would very specific?
Yo, thank you, Bargus. Hugely appreciated with the 5 gifted memberships. Thank you, Bargus. Thank you. Big dub for the 5 gifted memberships in chat there.
Give her more support. But this was in 2015, slightly after Gamergate, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. Let's jump right into Brianna and Gamergate.
Okay, let's go. Real shit. Real shit. Do we get Deagle Nation? Please tell me we get Deagle Nation.
Oh, hey there,
I'm not seeing a Deagle Nation.
4-time Hugo Award.
Fucking Frank Lou. Fucking Frank, man. So unfortunately, Frank comes off like so just like goofy and just like dumb in any footage.
Award winner, Frank Wu. For the last 3 years, we've been working on the video game Revolution 60. And here to tell you more is anime legend Amanda Wynn Lee.
What's the exfiltration plan? If we're quiet, I think we can sneak past them. With Revolution 60, the story is yours to tell.
In 2007, Brianna met Frank Wu, who would marry her. In 2009, she'd claimed she had a grad degree she didn't have. In 2010, her fairly wealthy husband would then fund Brianna's endeavor in gaming, releasing a game in 2014 called Revolution 60. So, let's talk about Revolution 60. Brianna's sole gaming credit might feel familiar if you remember the art I showed off earlier in the video, and that's because several of the characters are straight up recycled from Election Eve and
Heavy
from
Rain?
other art. Holiday and Minuet being chief among them. Now, apparently, if you can believe such a thing, Brianna wasn't very fun to work with, as noted by this former employee of Brianna's studio, Giant Space Cat, ending the thread with the observation that Frank was the only one seen at the game's convention booth because Brianna was too busy with interviews. She's also been called out on social media before by other workers, and when I reached out to former development teammates to see if they had anything to say, no one responded except for one who simply said, "I don't talk about Brianna anymore, good luck." Now, Revolution 60 was a iOS release in 2014 with a Steam release slated that was delayed by 2 years to September 2016. These delays would result in some Kickstarter and Patreon backers being unsatisfied when the game did release and was still basically the same. And not very good, at least judging by the user scores on Steam. It's harder to go by the game's few professional reviews because there's evidence that either Brianna or her husband Frank Wu had close personal relationships and friendships with several journalists who reviewed the game. Now, regardless of any possible positive reviews, the game's overall reception would be middling at best, and most of the user reviews skewed negative on both iOS and the Steam release. Because Brianna was a target of Gamergate, it's hard to say how much of the game's criticism is legitimate, or just angry trolling, but by and large, it seems like the early reviews of the game on iOS praise the game's ambition, but overall range from middling to negative, a sentiment shared by Steam reviews citing game-breaking bugs and technical issues. If there's one thing this game is remembered for, it's probably the art style, which is a 3D adaptation
of
like
absolute
comics
shit.
years earlier in that it is almost entirely a cast of spindly doll-like women. Notably, several character designs, like the one featured in this poster, would be eventually changed, and in interviews, Brianna would cite feedback from other women specifically for shifting her character design ethos, which may explain the changes. Again, it sure seems like Brianna's definition of strong femininity is...
Wait. You're saying that cis women didn't like the bizarre, like, fetishized, impossibly skinny, freakish alien designs? Really? No way. What?
Like fetish gear.
These are... So on the left is a character from Soul Calibur 5, and on the right is your character from Revolution 60.
Absolutely.
And you know, so to the superficial observer, these might look the same.
They might. I think it's all about intent. You know, I created these character models myself, and well, at least I did the design. But you know, so the difference is like Vanessa and Holiday both have very skin-tight outfits. But the difference to me is when I played Piano 3, I saw someone I could imagine myself as.
Yeah.
Like, she's cool, she's badass, she's
Yeah.
prolific.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
And the difference is all about empowerment and intent.
Within a few weeks of release, Revolution 60 didn't reach further than the top 1,000 downloads for iPhone, despite being a free download that included the demo and a purchase that unlocked the rest of the full game. Now again, this video isn't about examining Brianna's creative work and tearing it apart.
She always acts like it was such a crazy success.
Examining commonalities between this and her early work that support conclusions like the fabrication of Lauren Malovey, I don't really care to examine much in Revolution 60. It seems like a garish, uncoordinated genre blend that lines up with all of Brianna's previous work, blending her distinct influences in a way that never feels original or unique. But I do think it is telling that despite spending more than 4 years developing the game and several hundred thousands of estimated dollars, primarily funded by her husband Frank Wu, Revolution 60 was the end result. While Giant Space Cat as a studio did ship a product, the sheer amount of time and money expended echoed Brianna's first startup at 19 that wasted similarly exorbitant funds on her creative endeavors. Add to this little things in the game's design that just make me scratch my head, like all the female characters using the same character model, like all the characters apparently having 10,000 polys, which would be hysterically unoptimized for iOS at the time, and probably contributed to the numerous technical issues. Much of the soundtrack are royalty-free songs. Tons of the assets are apparently just from Unreal assets.
She claimed to have done the music for the game. I don't think DeadDomain's quite doing the claims around this game justice right now. Maybe she gets more into it in a moment. But yeah, like the amount of shit that Brianna Wu said about this game, saying she did the music and saying that it was like they were pushing the very limits of Unreal Engine. They might have been trying to render like 10,000 polys on fucking iPhone in 2012 or whatever, in 2015. Yeah, you might have been pushing the limits of the engine then, but not because you were doing anything particularly impressive, just because you fucking suck at designing games. Yeah. No, not 1996. This isn't in 1996. This is in fucking 2014.
Packs and more. Again, most of this was found years ago by internet sleuths, so thank them for their work so I don't have to play this thing. Okay, but so what? She put out a middling game, maybe she wasn't a very good boss, and pissed off Kickstarter backers. Well, it's because like everything else Brianna does, no matter how unsuccessful, her time as a game developer didn't dissuade her from seeking a spotlight, using what she would sell as her expertise in the industry to spark conversations about being a woman in said industry. Which was the real start of Brianna Wu's story. For most people in the media sphere, the first time they heard about Wu was during Gamergate, and bear with me because there was so much random internet drama I've had to sort through with various factions, backstabs, inconsistencies, and perspectives. I've done my best to source and cite everything I say like I always do. And having said that, I think it's safe to say...
Dude, literally, I feel for this right now. Doing any Gamergate history stuff is literally like, it's nightmarish. Like, unironically nightmarish. So much shit missing. So much shit where it's like, okay, Ethan Ralph is saying this in an article on his website. What? Can I find the corroboration? How much do I trust Ethan Ralph's reporting on this?
Brianna Wu was the biggest opportunist on any side of Gamergate. Now, I don't have time to regurgitate the full timeline of everything and everyone associated, but for those who don't remember, Gamergate was a hate campaign leveled at Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian specifically. These two, and several others throughout the gaming industry, were targeted for various reasons, ranging from being vocal proponents of basic feminist theory about female game characters being too sexualized in the male gaze from Anita, to Zoe's controversy around a review for their game that kicked off the whole thing. If you want a truly in-depth and incisive look at the controversy, I highly recommend my friend Savvy Writes Books video on the subject, as she goes incredibly deep through the controversy, step by step, in a way I just don't have time to do here.
A 6-hour Gamergate video. Dude, what? That ain't no fucking way.
The broad strokes are, while some people tried to focus the movement on a nebulous idea of ethics and accountability in game journalism, for many people, Gamergate consisted of several harassment campaigns that made some women in the industry feel incredibly unsafe. And that was before Brianna Wu came into the picture. This article from The Guardian lays out some key points in the Gamergate timeline, such as bomb threats in March 2014 after an appearance by Anita Sarkeesian is announced, and the August 16th, 2014 blog post that alleges Zoe Quinn slept with someone at Kotaku.
So they like just saying, oh, Gamergate was a series of harassment campaigns. It's like fucking retarded. What is the Ethan Klein shit right now? Is that a harassment campaign? No, there's harassment on both sides, and there's a big political disagreement, and that happens all the time. That's how it goes. There's a big political disagreement that gets especially contentious online, and there's harassment on both sides. It wasn't like it was just one or the other. I remember when Milo, I think it was Milo Yiannopoulos, Christina Hoff Sommers, and someone else went to speak to the Society of Professional Journalists, the SPJ, and there was a bomb threat called in that day. So it wasn't just like it was women getting bomb threats. It's like such a stupid presentation. It's so dumb. It's like this is how contentious political disagreement always ends up online. There is harassment. It always goes bad. It always gets bad. It was not a harassment campaign. There were people who were genuinely upset and expressing genuine frustration on points that were totally valid online, and that was the broad majority of it. And you can even look, there was some media analysis organization did some analysis about how much negative sentiment there even was, how much harassment there was, stuff like that. There's a bunch of different arguments around it, but just present it as, oh, it's just harassment campaigns. It's like, no, it wasn't. There were genuine problems with some of these games journalists and the connections they had with developers that people were calling out, rightly so.
For a positive review. And then just seemingly out of nowhere, after months of harassment concentrated on these two women, Brianna is mentioned on October 9th. You see, it's hard to talk about how Brianna fits into the picture between Anita and Zoe because she kind of doesn't.
Yeah, she's inserted herself. Very true. Very true. Zoe Quinn got dragged through the mud because her ex dropped a hit piece basically saying, fuck this bitch, she cheated on me with all these other guys and a bunch of games journos that reviewed her game. And so she did get a load of harassment, but there was also a lot of very valid criticism of the journalists, obviously, that they had failed their obligations there by having a sexual relationship with her and then reviewing her game. So that you know, that's a totally legitimate critique to make of those people. Not of Zoe Quinn, to be fair. Like, I don't think, and Total Biscuit actually made this point. I remember back when he made videos on this, that it's not really on Zoe Quinn. Like, you expect games companies to do whatever they can to get good reviews, whether that's trying to line people's pockets or if it's a solo female developer maybe sleeping with the journalists. You kind of expect them to do whatever they can to get a good review out of the outlet. The job of the outlet and the journalist is to have that responsibility and to either recuse themselves from reviewing or declining the relationship, shutting the relationship down, whatever it be, but maintaining their ethical standards in their reporting and in their reviewing. It's their job to do that. It's Zoe Quinn's job to get good reviews, to be fair. Like, that is kind of, that's just good for her.
When Zoe and
then Anita Sarkeesian obviously was just doing like, she had kind of a bullshit, you know, the Kickstarter was kind of iffy. And then she made those feminist frequency videos that were very dumb and missed the point a lot of time. Like, there was some legitimate feminist analysis in them, but there was a lot of really dumb shit where she just didn't understand the game she was talking about. Like, there was the big one, obviously, with the one people always mention is with Hitman Absolution or whatever, where she put in footage of Hitman Absolution, was talking about how you get points for killing the hookers or something, or the strippers or whatever, but then if you look at the footage, it's like actively you're losing points in-game. So there's like dumb shit like that. But like Anita Sarkeesian, like, did she really deserve any harassment or anything? Like, no. Like, I mean, like, light disagreement, but like, was there? I mean, obviously no one deserves harassment, but light disagreement. But was the vitriol with which people acted about it justified? Probably not. I don't think. It wasn't really that crazy. And like, some of the stuff people got mad about was so dumb too. Like, stealing footage from walkthroughs instead of recording the footage yourself. Like, who gives a fuck?
Anita were getting death threats and harassment, Brianna wasn't a well-known industry personality by any stretch. Despite what she'd say later about being one of the foremost women in tech, nobody really knew who she was. She was working on an indie phone game with very few eyes on it that didn't look very good, sporting Brianna's trademark lack of style and failing to generate any wider interest upon release. Yet, as a woman in the game industry, she took it upon herself to taunt and mock the Gamergate dorks she saw as basement-dwelling losers. In fact, she spent a lot of time and effort trying to goad people into engaging with her online. I don't want to make it sound like she didn't get any harassment, by the way, but there is overwhelming evidence that Brianna continually went out of her way to poke and prod the Gamergate forums, which you can see in these tweets from October 10th, 2014. You can see from these tweets she starts the mocking around 10:30 a.m., and by 4:30 p.m., she announces the same day that 8chan has doxed her, and proceeds to talk about fleeing her home with her husband for fear of violence, particularly pointing to threats not from 8chan, but from a Twitter account, Chatter Whiteman. 3 days later, Brianna had an interview on the front page of Cosmopolitan. Soon enough, the list of her interviews would encompass the Boston Globe, Verge, Polygon, Huffington Post, VentureBeat, Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, 6axis, and like a dozen others, all focused on the narrative that this Gamergate harassment campaign had driven a game developer from her home. Now, this is anecdotal, but I spent hours Googling, gathering, and searching for interviews done by Anita, Brianna, and Zoe during this time. When it was active in 2014 and the year or so following, with rare exceptions like an appearance on a talk show from Anita, almost all of Quinn and Sarkeesian's interviews came years after the harassment campaigns that were threatening them and their families' lives. Brianna wasn't like that. For as much hate as they received and were targeted for, they very obviously wanted to try and continue living their lives, and were hesitant to be cast as some kind of ideological leaders on the front lines of Gamergate, despite not being given much of a choice. Compare, for example, Anita being quoted as saying it's frustrating to be known as a survivor of Gamergate, and then Brianna can...
Dude, okay. No, actually, I understand this from Anita Sarkeesian. I kind of understand this. She was trying to do her gay feminist video essays, right? Like, they sucked. But that is clearly what she wanted to do. So, being known as just, like, that person who got harassed online probably is annoying. You probably wanted to be known for your body of work, right?
Continuing to wear it as a badge of honor, to this day proudly touting her facing down the internet hordes as an achievement.
I'm a former game developer, and I think most people know me from Gamergate. You know, I remember during Gamergate, you know, there was this expansionist thing that it wasn't enough to talk about the number of women we were hiring in the game industry. You know, now we had to obliterate whiteness as something that we were featuring in games. And I'm like, it's a little bit...
So I don't see this as a conservative versus not conservative issue. This to me is, it's like, it's a mind virus, this stuff. It really is.
I think you're right. It's not necessarily political. I don't know whether an army should reflect society.
I don't give a shit if it reflects society. I don't care. I want the army to be good at doing its job. Why does every institution have to be a tool of...
What am I doing on this show?
Social engineering.
Sorry, 1 minute. Otto Waffle saying, the problem during that era was more general IMO, like a lot of channels would portray themselves just being critical, but would focus exclusively on idiots to make feminism look bad. I mean, this is still common. This is still pretty common, where there are channels that will, you know, like Noxtaku, for instance. Noxtaku is a great example, where he's like, oh, I just care about chaos. I just care about comedy and chaos. But every video about Trump is like, whoa, Trump is so awesome. Trump's amazing. And then every video about anyone slightly left-leaning is like, these guys are crazy terrorist supporters, communists. It's like... I understand you're saying you're not ideological. You're saying this isn't about the politics. Yet every video has the same presentation, the same bent. It's like, it's obvious what you're doing.
What is my purpose here? Does anybody know? What have I to offer?
a conservative versus not conservative issue. This to me is, it's like it's a mind virus, this stuff. It really is.
I think you're right. It's not necessarily political. I don't know whether an army should reflect society.
I don't give a shit if it reflects society. I don't care. I want the army to be good at doing its job. Why does every institution have to be a tool of...
What am I doing on this show?
Social engineering, effectively, right?
What is my purpose here? Does anybody know? What have I to offer? What's inside my head? Should I be listening to what that other bloke just said? What should I say? I'm at a loss. If I start talking now, will Constantine be cross? Or having to read the news or studied any books? Constantine's the brains of this, so I must be the looks. I know that there will come a day when I will come up with a clever thing to say, and when I say it, everyone will know what I am doing on this show.
Sorry, Francis. I just to follow up on that. We, as far as I mean, I didn't know you had this here. I don't know if we have in the UK. We did have some kind of
Francis Foster cameo. Have to play the video. Have to play the video.
We're hiring in the game industry. Now we had to obliterate whiteness as something that we were featuring in games.
Okay, man.
It's a little bit extreme, but we'll go along with it. So it was just one more step after another.
I'm not saying Brianna was never harassed or sent death threats, but the speed with which she not only entered the conversation, but went from nobody knowing her name to apparently needing to flee her house for fear of her life, all the while she continued speaking up, is so wildly at odds with what you see from Zoe and Anita. That's just a fact. You can take it however you want. Oh, and let's not forget the fact that she talks shit about them later in some DMs. We'll talk about that more when we get to the long list of enemies she's made. This is, however, not at all at odds with Brianna's long-observed history of needing attention and shifting her aims and approaches to get that spotlight. This is another fact. Anita and Zoe, for whatever you might think about them, had their entire lives derailed by Gamergate. Brianna, however, suddenly got a platform, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this happened to be around the time she was still trying to get her eyes on her personal game project that floundered upon its initial iOS release. She seems to have used the opportunities afforded by the copious media appearances to not only drive home the idea that she was personally being persecuted and suffering from this movement, but also that independent and female game developers needed support, like she needed, for example, for the game that she was developing at the time, the game that nobody really cared about before she fled from her home, and the same game that would get reviews and press coverage from the same outlets that allowed Brianna to basically uncritically write whatever she wanted about Gamergate. The thing about Gamergate is, at the time, it neatly divided the industry into for or against. If you were perceived to have spoken out against harassment, you would be labeled an SJW cuck, and if you expressed any kind of apprehension about the overly flat criticism of people like Anita Sarkeesian, you would be easily lumped in with a bigoted hate mob doxing and attempting to ruin people's lives. When tensions run high, there's not a lot of room for nuance in these...
Okay, this is more reasonable. I think just presenting it as harassment campaigns is just annoying to me, because that verbiage... Basically, that is used to sweep up all criticism. That is used to basically collect anyone criticizing as being part of this broader campaign. And that allows you to discredit people, even when they're being totally reasonable and offering totally valid points.
Screaming matches between sides, despite the best efforts of plenty of people, and a number of commentators and internet historians have tried to approach the subject with that nuanced sense. It was the perfect environment for someone like Brianna to thrive in, where she could make...
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say it's just like every political disagreement online. It wasn't an organized effort to go after anyone or some shit like that. It is sporadic disparate, like, internet skirmishes between little pockets of people who disagree on things that pop up online. Like, something happens, an article comes out, or a game comes out or something, the people that are interested in that are all bickering over it. Some of them are way too crazy and invested about it, and end up harassing the other side. That's just how it goes. That's how the internet goes.
Whatever accusations she wanted, and when asked for proof, would simply accuse someone of being a Gamergator, like she did with notable not Gamergator David Pakman during a kind of now infamous interview.
This was
the
awesome.
reason I chose to show what was going on with me was because the industry had chosen to stay silent. It was literally a choice for me to make my life, put it in danger, and to talk about this openly in the hope that would force the industry to finally look in the mirror and address some of these things.
Well, let's unpack that, because that's interesting to me. When you talk about the industry has remained silent, can you be a little more specific in the sense that in spending, quite a bit of time researching and preparing for this interview, it seemed without question that some of the threats you received through Twitter and publicized were reported ostensibly by those also claiming membership or allegiance to Gamergate. So are we really talking about the movement as the problem, or are we talking about a faction of those identifying with it as the problem? So the question about just this account, BROLOLZ, that's you, right? Is that a sock puppet account? Did you try to hide the fact that was you? What's the story with that?
No, oh my God, this is the most ridiculous thing on the entire planet. I'm very happy to address it.
It was just a parody account as far as I'm aware.
So a tactic that Gamergate has done quite a bit with Not Your Shield is they've created fake accounts from, like, say, a black feminist woman, and they've put it out there, and they try to portray themselves this way. I created an account that's similar to, there have been other parody accounts, and the idea was this was a frat bro that was very for feminism. And it is just a silly joke. In fact, to make it very clear that it wasn't a sock puppet, because I was worried about people thinking I was doing that, I announced it on my Twitter. I just completely set it on the account. It is nothing more than a joke. And
so it's a satirical account. You never meant it.
It's a satirical account. If you don't understand it's a joke, it's because
Sorry,
Gamergate
guys,
doesn't
I've got a brief Kanye update. Brief Kanye aside. What is happening here?
I definitely am more like Stag Vixen and shit. You guys know this term? Yeah. It's more like swap. It's kind of like, same. Yeah. People call us cucks and then I'll get cucked and shit just for like to switch it up. But
for the rush,
Yeah, it's like
kind of rush.
Like be on the outside of the door and shit.
Heart racing.
Yeah. Okay, so did y'all figure out what y'all?
Yeah, I'm waiting for Cameron to come back. He has all like the timestamps and stuff. Yeah, we're gonna put it today.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but like it doesn't even touch the sides really, does it? Once you release the I Gave My Cousin Head song, I stopped caring about the cuck stuff. I'm gonna be real.
The example.
Well, let's finish the clip anyway.
He had the movie up, just watching it, but I think I gotta take time to really study and know exactly what's going on so I can replicate.
Are we streaming or no?
Yeah.
We're streaming?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I wish I knew.
Oh, we're live?
The audio on or off?
No, the audio's off.
The audio's off all the time?
It's off.
Dude.
Involved. I have to tell you, I feel like this is kind of a hit piece that you're doing on me right now, to be honest.
Whoa. Let's talk about that. Hold on a second.
Well, in a moment. I want to answer your question first. I feel like you're really putting me on trial here. And
no, by no means. By no means. I think that's an unfair allegation.
Okay. To answer your question, he had some questions that were sent to me. I think it was about 20 to 30 of them. Some of them were ridiculously leading, just ridiculously leading. And I said to him, I think you're going to need to phrase these more neutrally. or I'm not going to be able to answer them. I also sent them to a friend of mine, Glenn Fleischman, who is a very famous journalist, a very, very, very famous, well-regarded journalist, writes for The Economist. And he actually just laughed at the questions because he didn't find them ethical.
That's perfectly fair. Listen,
Yeah.
last thing, let's address your allegation that this is a hit piece.
Sure.
The way that I take particular issue with, I have absolutely no horse in this race. When I announced I was going to be interviewing you, I received a deluge of emails saying the fact that I was interviewing you alone and not someone in opposition to you was evidence that I was in the tank for the other side. And of course, I think you would disagree with that. All I'm doing is I spent many hours researching, and I don't want to be accused of not asking you the questions that others believe should absolutely be asked. I've not cut you off. I've presented you with a fair opportunity to answer every single claim, and I hope to have someone on with an opposing view next week or the week after to you, and they will be asked all of the same tough questions that you would want asked. So I take very significant issue with the allegation that this is in any way a hit piece. I have absolutely no preconceived notion of what right and wrong is on this particular issue. I'm open to hearing both sides, and I'm merely doing my job as a journalist.
I mean, sure. I would say, yeah, that's fine if you're going to monologue.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, if I'm going to monologue? Brianna, you know, you're breaking up. I don't know if you have a good connection. We got cut off. All we heard before you got interrupted was if I want to monologue.
You just told me, you gave me a long monologue about why you don't feel that this was an aggressive hit piece. What I would say to you is this has been, you've asked me like one question to present my side, and then you've asked me some very, very aggressive questions, you know, questioning my credibility, this and that. And I feel like most of what you've asked here has been
so crazy.
aggressive.
Literally so crazy to get triggered into a meltdown by fucking David Pakman of all people. The most, like, just, he's not particularly aggressive. He's not particularly cutting. He's just like, he's pretty, you know, down the middle, you know.
I'm happy to answer that. I tried to answer these as aggressively as possible, but I wish we could spend as much time talking about the issues at hand rather than the controversy that Gamergate is trying to, you know, frankly sling mud with my reputation over.
This kind of reaction from Brianna is another staple, even against Kickstarter backers and Patreon subs who would question her later. She'd simply call them Gamergate supporters or abusers. I want to say that the divides between people from that time and the obvious agendas being pursued make digging into these topics incredibly difficult, because trying to find information on Brianna Wu or any of the other targets will bring up endless piles of assholes, referring to women as subhumans and SJWs. But on the less extreme fringes, there were still plenty of people who kept tabs on the inconsistencies in Brianna's story, which isn't easy because there are so many. Suffice to say, this video took a lot of digging. Like this Reddit thread where they note that they rarely saw people comment harassment on Brianna's Twitter despite her claiming. And that, despite claiming to have fled her home, Brianna was very clearly doing interviews, or at least appearing to, from her home soon after having fled. But as we can see from some of these interviews, the image of someone being forced to flee from her home by Gamergate is a shocking and compelling one. That sensationalism is another aspect of Brianna's story that has remained steadfast. Yet, like her stories about college, having degrees, about being a crime reporter, doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny. For example, there are several consistency issues with the way she tells the story of her being forced to flee, most notably elements from the interviews and articles she wrote within days of the doxing being inconsistent with the way she would tell the same story months later, or some elements being seemingly missing, like the idea she had been getting harassment for months leading up to the tweet.
Crazy that DeadDomain is actually trying to pick apart harassment claims here. Very dangerous game trying to dispel someone's harassment claims.
Eventually just being simplified to the tweets being the lone catalyst for the exodus. If you can feel the creeping sensation of something just being off about Brianna's story, don't worry, plenty of other people noticed, because even back then she'd be caught lying and attempting to bait harassment towards herself personally. Like this infamous post from her Steam forum account where she refers to herself in third person as a notable feminist and is very clearly trying to goad people into talking shit about her. Notable feminists, by the way, doing some real heavy lifting here. While forum posts and some articles did show Brianna's interest in progressive feminism and women's rights and representation issues, she wasn't particularly notable at this time for being a feminist, any more than she was notable ever for being an artist or a journalist. What am I saying? She still sells herself as all of these things, no matter how much she actually knows about any of this. I'm surprised at this point she doesn't call herself a chef because she made a TV dinner once and didn't burn the brownie. She likes to, let's say, stretch the truth, if that wasn't obvious by now. For example, like how she would depict threats against her life, even when the same threats had long been revealed to be jokes. After an obvious online troll, Jace Connors went on several tirades trying to challenge Brianna to a street race, Brianna continued to claim he was threatening her.
Deagle Nation mention? Deagle Nation mention? Can we... I can't believe what she did to this guy. I can't believe what she did to this guy.
Oh, YouTube, this is Jace right here, and this is my fucking car, or my mom's car, that when I was street racing, could not perform! Couldn't fucking perform on the road, and now the piece of shit is crashed, okay? I can't even kick the windshield out because it's made of bullshit plastic from Chinks, and I wasn't even fucking drunk, I was just racing, you know, like normal. I was trying to street race in the fucking highway, and look at this bullshit, look at this shit, totally useless. I hit, and I fucking rolled on the ice, fucking rolled down here, and now look at this piece of shit. I'm a street racing god! Fuck! I'm a street racing god!
So good.
And this is all because of Ivan and the rest of these tourists who fucking made me do this, and this isn't my fault. And just because the road was slippery doesn't mean I'm not a street racing god!
Jace here. I'm posting this for evidence of attempted murder. I didn't realize it at the time, but the timing was too perfect. I suspect Brianna Wu rigged my mom's Prius to crash and or kill me to silence me from being a Gamergate vigilante. I challenged Brianna to a street race for Gamergate, and right after that she bought a racing motorcycle. Then this happened. This crash happened today while I was driving to Wu's house in order to expose her as a corrupt gamer by racing her on camera. Brianna Wu's motorbike. Wu's super expensive new bike. Suspicious timing much? Not convinced? What about this thinly veiled death threat? She is threatening me. Risk of dying. Yeah, right. This is my motorcycle, Redline. Every time I ride, I accept a risk of dying 17 greater than riding a car. Yes, I'm the one who threatened Brianna on Twitter and elsewhere. But those were red herring threats designed to draw her out of hiding. I'm not just some threatening thug. I don't believe in violence. I believe in justice. My only weapon is the truth. I'm armed with the truth of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I will defeat this gaming conspiracy at one time and for all. I don't believe in coincidences, gamers. Today's race was only supposed to be phase 1 of an operation I had planned to destroy the SJW movement together with Eli. Now that phase 1 has failed, and Wu is onto me, it's safe to declassify the rest of the operation. It will be known as... Operation Woopocalypse. Wow. The SJW movement has gone too far. As a gaming vigilante, it is my job to hold the industry responsible. This counter-journalism campaign will uncover shocking facts to discredit the SJW people online, dude. I may have been out of the race, but my co-journalist Elijah is ready halfway across the continent, ready to begin phase 2. This is not over. Elijah is a seasoned war journalist who documented the Israel-Palestine conflict with its overseas vlogging. He is more than up to the task of uncovering this corruption. Oh, yeah, what did they used to say? They used to say that Tupac was being held in Palestine or Israel, and they had to save him, and they smoke weed because US Army snipers smoke weed to steady their aim, and all that. There were a bunch. There was so much shit they used to say. Oh man, we'll pull up my video. 1 minute.
Today.
1 second. Let's find the Woopocalypse bit in this video. I've got so many good little clips here, man. This one. Did I not put that many in?
That I've gotten this year. So this is one of the 106 death threats that I've gotten this year. I'm going to play it for you. I want to tell you this is pretty shocking.
Yes.
This is
pretty shocking, guys. This is shocking stuff here.
106 death threats that I've gotten this year. I'm going to play it for you. I want to tell you this is pretty shocking.
This is the Skulls Manifesto. My crew will take care of the fucking women in gaming issue that you've all been hearing about on the gamer sites. We're gonna deal with this vigilante style, basically. I've pretty much unchained the beast within. I'm gonna go bloodthirsty on these fascists and like.
Even if they seem absurd. So, and then there's. This one's amazing.
Thing I've ever seen. We swear. My husband, like really graphic stories, like talking about how they were gonna get me and cut the skin off my body. He claimed he had crashed his car on the way to my house. It's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. He swears he's gonna deliver justice to me.
Fuck you to Brianna Wu for being a hates gaming. Brianna Wu is a fucking homosexual motherfucker, and I would dispense elite justice on her soul with a single knife wound.
Elite justice. So awesome, man.
Her life. It'd later be revealed that Jace was merely a troll character being played by comedian
Jan
Rankowski as an elaborate absurdist bit.
You think?
I'm not saying it's a good bit.
It was.
This all seems very stupid.
No,
but that doesn't change it being intended as a joke. And more importantly, that Brianna wasn't actually in real danger, and she knew this. Despite this revelation, Brianna would continue to hold up.
It's not just that she wasn't in real danger. It's that if you're not like below 90 IQ, you can identify that it's not real danger. Also, yeah, I'm gonna wiggle for 2 seconds.
This joke as a legitimate threat on her life, even announcing she had contacted the FBI over it. She also appeared on the Sci-Fi Channel in an interview for the program The Internet Ruined My Life, where she cried over these very same jokers and how they'd been trying to kill her. The episode aired in 2016, well after the hoax had been exposed, by the way.
We spent about a week and a half out of our house, and at a certain point, you can't live out of a hotel forever.
Interestingly, this segment is actually directly at odds with a 2015 Inc. interview, which states that she spent the better part of a month, not just a week and a half on the run. Just one of the many ways her story kind of just changes over time when it comes to fleeing her house.
This man himself sent me a very specific, terrifying video.
This is my car, and now the piece of shit is crashed.
Where he claimed he had crashed his car on the way to my house. It is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Where he swears he's gonna deliver justice to me in his own hands. It made me feel so helpless.
So, being as charitable as I can be, I'm willing to extend the graceful idea that Brianna might have misspoken or been rattled by the harassment and doxing. People get details mixed up, it happens. But as the inconsistencies between Brianna's stories and other evidence mounts, it gets a lot harder to be so charitable. And it's truly regrettable that nobody was willing or likely able to question her stories for fear of being aligned with a verifiable hate movement of antisocial weirdos like Gamergate. Because Brianna Wu's long history of having a persecution complex, which again we've seen in her college days and forums, truly came to the forefront in these months. The result is that now most of the journalism, using the term very loosely here, is from outlets like fucking Breitbart. But they are reporting on verifiable sources, so I have to rely on them for this nightmare. Meanwhile, many more progressive-leaning outfits were outright just okay having Brianna Wu just completely structure and create her own narratives with very little oversight. giving full control to her to ostensibly weave whatever narrative she wanted to, and being that a lot of coverage of Gamergate wasn't from people actually inside the game industry, but mainstream publications.
She's just like a narcissistic, like pushy, domineering person who will just like make connections and then start spazzing the fuck out if they're not doing what they want, doing what she wants.
The sensationalism behind stories like women game devs forced to leave their house, there wasn't a lot of oversight or curtailing for Brianna's narratives. From a Jezebel article about harassment received from women in media where Brianna was interviewed, quote, "I had someone last week that made a video talking about how they're going to murder me," Wu added. "It's not just I'm going to kill Brianna. This is like a multi-minute rant about why they want to murder me, how. Their face is visible. I have their name and testimony from the people who know them and how unbalanced they are. This person lives 15 minutes from my house." Wu called the police, which she's had to do numerous times since Gamergate blew up. To her amazement, even this particular threat hasn't resulted in an arrest. This is what I want to emphasize to you. As much as you can have something going for you with death threats, I do, she said. I have a very high profile case. There's so much media attention. I have the ear of the police. They have every reason to want to solve this crime, but at the same time, nothing has happened, even giving them as much information as I have. This article was published January 29th, 2015. In May, just a few months after that article she wrote was published, she had an interview with the Mary Sue where she blamed law enforcement for not acting after receiving a death threat. This would lead to the Ohio prosecutor's office coming out and saying that not only had they not received any reports from Wu, but they had all been forced to waste time and resources after the Mary Sue article led a bunch of people to calling and yelling at them to take action for crimes that Brianna Wu had apparently not actually reported to them. Other tidbits from Brianna's Gamergate odyssey would eventually emerge, including leaked chat logs from Zoe Quinn's Crash Override network, where several other prominent creators are seen talking.
Dude, Peter Coffin. Wait, I haven't seen this. Peter Coffin? Brianna, I've been out of contact with her for a bit. We may be having two conversations simultaneously, my fault. In a very sensitive place, when insanity acts entirely on impulse with no thought for appearance, consequences, or tactics.
About Brianna behind her back in derisive tones.
I feel
featuring other notable personalities like Peter Coffin and Ian Miles Chong. Let me put bigger.
Dude, Ian Miles Chong. Ian Miles Chong before he changed sides. Yeah, she said and done a few very damaging things to her own cause. We have to be tactical about this. Dude.
Quotations around the word notable. There's a lot of depicting Brianna as a loose cannon who was prone to flying off the handle, and interestingly at the time, inserting herself and taking over.
Ian Miles Chong is not the GOAT, dude. Come on now. Brianna got modded on Ghazi, that's Gamer Ghazi, a subreddit at the time. Members of Why Am I Remix series community doesn't mean fake. Okay. Bad decision, see loose cannon.
Conversations about minorities,
I'm disappointed she accepted.
Particularly when it came to transgender people. Because while Brianna was still depicting herself as a cis woman, pretty much the entire world was able to piece together that she was trans.
Erica was accusing her of transphobia. Just quash the rumors of being trans at least. No, she can still be trans. She's not versed in the grammar of talking about trans issues. It's stupid. The entire fucking thing is stupid. It's fucking stupid.
Even her allies. One other strange and forgotten piece of Brianna's story is this post on her blog where she claims a former Gamergator sent her an email apologizing for how Brianna was harassed. I am so sorry about the way you have been treated. You are a beautiful, talented, intelligent woman who is worth 1 million of those people involved in Gamergate, myself included. I am no longer involved in it. In fact, I may just work against. I know, though, it is time for me to stand down from my pedestal and listen to women, to let them steer culture and not resist the betterment and balance they will bring. End quote. Before you ask, this is not the only time Brianna would proudly assert that some unverifiable source just completely agrees with her positions with fawning adulation. This is something that she still does today. From a source I would speak to later, she also does this with modern political sources, saying she has meetings, for example, with high-level Democrats, which she does on social media without usually mentioning specifically who. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna.
What she spoke about, what, is it Chelsea Manning or something that she talks about going to gay bars with or some shit?
never gave me any specifics about the things that she did. I think in part because she knew that I would ask some questions you might not know to ask if you haven't done that kind of work before. So she was always very vague. She was like, I look at polls, I coordinate with other organizations. I just got so tired of hearing her claiming, I look at polls and I'm constantly talking to high-level Democratic officials and I have meetings. And it's like, where is the evidence of any of that? End quote. So is she just lying? Or just coincidentally talks to more unverifiable people than anybody else on the planet? And lest we forget, by this point she had fabricated Lauren Malovey, and would in these years do the same thing again with Natalie O'Brien. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk about Natalie in a second.
Let's go.
You might ask, why would
Let's go. Next fake identity. Here we go.
For all this, and the only answer
Why is the audio not synced? I don't know, man. I don't know.
I can offer is because it turned Brianna Wu from somebody nobody knew about, working on a game that frankly didn't look that good, to someone that needed your support and the support of gaming outlets when that game came out. Again, in sharp contrast to Zoe and Anita, Brianna continued to insert herself into all kinds of online drama, drumming up conflict with Total Biscuit, causing a row over an article about how Samus from the Metroid series is actually trans, and plenty of other small
TV mention, let's go.
Online scuffles that I don't really care about reiterating when the point is she very obviously just relished the spotlight. And with that spotlight, especially after fleeing her home, she soon garnered the scrutiny of online communities like Kiwi Farms. As you might expect for a woman in tech, depicting herself as a brave fighter against vitriolic online harassers who had been covered by
TV was just the best game in YouTube. It is fucked up, man. Seriously, out of everyone that could have died, it's so fucking annoying that it was him. You know, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many gaming YouTubers I would have rather die of cancer than Total Biscuit.
By this point, Brianna's Patreon popped off quite a bit, especially considering one of the main selling points for Patreon was depicted as that money going towards someone at her game company, Giant Space Cat, being hired to specifically deal with harassment. Like the death threats she had cited from people who had publicly admitted to be hoaxes. Let's not put that aside for now. Again, I'm not saying Brianna never got harassed or doxxed. I am stating a fact. She had a history.
Basically, any Actman, 100% Actman, the whole way Actman, Actman till the ends of the earth, till I fucking die, till I can't say Actman no more. Actman, 100% of the way.
Of embellishing the danger she was in. Again, think back to the saga of leaving her house. Then on March 9th, 2015, an anonymous Medium post speculated that instead of using part of the Patreon money to pay the aforementioned Twitter harassment specialist, Natalie O'Brien, the Medium post instead posited the theory that Natalie didn't actually exist. Brianna had made her up and simply pocketed the money. Already, this should sound familiar. Brianna is a liar, we've established that, but we've also established a history of evidence that she's a liar. Of course, she's never come out to admit to making up a girlfriend in college, making up harassing emails, making up entire people. So if at this point you still want to give the benefit of the doubt to say, maybe she did hire Natalie, maybe she didn't make her up, I want you to ask yourself, what are the odds of one person having multiple examples of even maybe making up people to entirely agree with or support them, and having strong evidence that they've done this multiple times? And if you have any remaining doubts as to whether Brianna is a liar or these are just the most coincidental coincidences ever, by the end of the video, I aim to lay all of those doubts to rest. From the Medium post, quote, I initially became suspicious when having a conversation with a local friend involved in IT who had previously a business dealing with Brianna. When I mentioned that I donated to her Patreon, he suggested that I do a little more digging on the veracity of her claims. In doing so, I noticed several claims that seemed dubious. The one that concerns me most is of Natalie O'Brien because it is a purely financial matter and does not involve subjective ideas about politics or social justice. Simply enough, Brianna Wu has likely made over $30,000 over the course of her patron's existence, and there is no evidence that the person she claims to be paying the money to, or any other person filling such a role, exists. In reaching out to fellow Bostonians in the gaming and coding community, I have not found a single person who knows a Natalie O'Brien. Further, in reaching out to people...
Crazy how this just all got totally overlooked at the time, and they were able to just completely astroturf this stuff away because of a harassment campaign. Wow! I wonder if there's any situations that might be happening more recently or even right now where we could potentially think about how claims of a harassment campaign are often used to stifle perfectly legitimate criticism and questions. Surely people don't fall for this same tactic again and again and again. Surely even the people that are against this tactic back then don't now use this and fall for this tactic. Surely not, right, guys?
Who have supposedly worked at Giant Space Cat Games with Natalie O'Brien. The only response I got from someone who had never heard of Natalie O'Brien or a pregnant employee at Giant Space Cat at all. When I contacted other members of the Giant Space Cat and Brianna Wu's professional circle, I was met with ignored emails and immediate blocks on Twitter. The lack of an answer is even more damning than simply
not everything is about Nick.
Had never heard of Natalie O'Brien. It's one thing to not be aware of someone you work with.
You guys are actually
like
obsessed.
An incredible overreaction to, instead of simply saying if you don't know the person or not, circle your wagons and refuse to speak on the subject. The only person in Brianna's social or professional circle who's been willing to speak publicly on the subject of Natalie O'Brien is former contract employee Emma Clarkson, and she also doubts Natalie's existence. Now, Brianna did respond, and after a few back and forth comments, she immediately turned to her regular deflection, saying, quote, "Look, I was willing to entertain outside chances you were legit, even though the odds were astronomical this was Gamergate. But give me a break. This is the adult world. I wasn't born yesterday, or as we said in Mississippi growing up, I didn't fall off the turnip truck. If you're legit, write us. We'll check your name against our records, and have a phone call with the person you think doesn't exist, but you're not legit. End of line." Oh, sick Tron reference, Bree. That nerd reference is definitely gonna age super well, even though it's only said in the movies by two villains. First, in the 1982 Steven Lisberger classic, when the Master Control Program is trying to extort Ed Dillinger, and second in the 2011 follow-up Tron Legacy, when Castor gets blown up by Clue. But, you know, Tron references aside, there's still no real evidence Natalie O'Brien ever worked at Giant Space Cat. Even at the time, she wasn't featured in any of the photos posted of the studio, and would have been one of, if not the only employee to not have any social media presence, despite apparently being specifically hired as a social media consultant to, according to Brianna, work full-time to run interference for the harassment and death threats Brianna was attracting. This lack of any representation, and most notably no photographic evidence of any kind, should ring familiar to Lauren Malovies. So with all this information at your disposal, draw what conclusions you will. Nobody ever talks about Tron 2.
What an awesome and defamation-free way of saying that, but I think we all know what we're thinking right now.
Point out, the first-person shooter made by Monolith, the same people who made Fear and Condemned. I'd rather talk about Tron 2.0 than Brianna. They had a Game Boy Advance spin-off. Had first-person full 3D sequences where you got to fly a recognizer and a light tank. You fly a recognizer in first person. Before I move on, I need to talk about Chloe Segal. I want to be clear, I do not want to sensationalize Brianna's relationship to
wow. Don't you guys love trans bread to your video essays and the way they just like will go on the they're like, "Oh, guys, by the way, do you know I have autism? Do you know I love this obscure video game? Guys, you know I have autism and I love this obscure video game. I can't even talk shit on it. I do this all the time." But it's just like, man, shut up.
Chloe. But during this period, trans game developer Chloe Segal had a public...
It's a prepared video. It's a prepared video.
...falling out with Brianna, claiming that Brianna ruined her life and refused to help her. Chloe sadly ended up taking her life in DMs that would later be leaked. I think Brianna comes across...
Yeah, exactly. It sucks when I do it. The reason I do it is because I'm live and my brain's just going there and I have to get it out. Cut this out. Cut this out of the video.
Less than sympathetic in the midst of Chloe breaking down and pleading with her. Again, I want to be very clear here. I bring this up mostly so that there isn't 1,000 comments talking about this piece of internet lore and trying to blame it on Brianna. I think at the end of the day, Chloe was a deeply troubled person and didn't get the comfort and support all people should have when going through some really...
Hers for 15 seconds, yours goes on for 10 minutes plus. Rebuttal. That would have been 10 minutes if she was live, at least.
Hard shit. And when people feel helpless,
yeah, you're right.
And like
you're
there's
right.
nowhere else to turn, sometimes it can end very badly. And I also won't pretend to know what it's like to have someone you know do that and then spend the rest of your life wondering if there was more you could have done. I imagine that is what Brianna struggles with. And
okay, sorry. This is about the Chloe Segal stuff. So Chloe Segal is a trans person who a lot of people blame her death on Kiwi Farm. So the evidence for that is contested. But basically, she lit herself on fire and killed herself after, like, some surgery stuff. And, like, I think she lied about what a GoFundMe... I think, don't take this 100%, I think the claim is that she lied about what a GoFundMe was for, claiming it was for a car accident recovery. No, it's not the Arab trans person. Claiming it was for car accident recovery, when really it was, like, bottom surgery or something. Yeah, there's, like, a whole bunch of just, like, yeah, just weird shit with this.
To Chloe. But during this period, trans game developer Chloe Segal had a public falling out with Brianna, claiming that Brianna ruined her life and refused to help her. Chloe sadly ended up taking her life in DMs that would later be...
Is there a reason why you avoid me? I'm confused as to why we as victims can't have some solidarity. I'm drowning here, I need some help. I'm not trying to push you out or frustrate you more, but just like me to raise my mind. But I'm not avoiding anybody, I'm simply a pretty busy woman. What's going on? I found out why I've been being abused. It turns out when Indiegogo and PayPal sees the funds I collected, they only refunded to people who asked for a refund and stole the rest of it.
Leaked. I think Brianna...
That sucks. People coming at me because they think I took it. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know what to do. I don't have the following to take on either of those opportunistic companies.
Across as less than sympathetic in the midst of Chloe breaking down and pleading with her. Again, I want to be...
If I tried to start a public inquiry into what happened, would you be willing to signal boost? Not a boycott, not a witch hunt, just a hey WTF, it's anything I can think of. It's something I'm sure even... I assume Gamergaters get behind. They want a corruption story. We have one. No, Chloe, the reason I'm saying this is I respect you. I have to be straight with you. If I don't respect you, to give you some bullshit answer, I don't know what happened between you and PayPal. I can't put my professional reputation on the line pursuing a situation I don't know anything about. And frankly, I just have other battles to fight.
Very clear here. I bring this up mostly so that there isn't 1,000 comments.
I don't have long to live. I need to do something. Don't trivialize me. I never trivialize you. I'm not trivializing you. I'm saying if I want friendship with this, couldn't be the format of it. You just imply that was childish. Like, pity, that hurts.
Talking about this piece of internet lore and trying to blame it on Brianna. I think at the end of the day...
It's going to be dramatic, yes. Why don't you take time to listen to me rather than tear me? I think it's fun to be abused constantly for 2 years because people think you stole money.
Chloe was a deeply troubled person and didn't get the comfort and support all people should have when going through some really hard shit. And when people feel helpless and like there's nowhere else to turn, sometimes it can end very badly. And I also won't pretend to know what it's like to have someone you know do that and then spend the rest of your life.
You're threatening me again, yes, because you're going to sit here and trigger me then like I'm the problem. You're not fucking better than me. Both human fucking beings treat me like I'm less than you. I know you're busy, but I figured, hey, you might be empathetic, but I'd see you keep composure and career.
Life wondering if there was more you could have done. I imagine that is what Brianna struggles with, and she doesn't need any other kind of invective to deal with around this particular issue if that's the case. What I can say is that suicide is never the answer, and you always have someone who will go out of their way to help you, so don't be afraid to reach out. Nobody is a burden, so don't be afraid to let others help you if you need it. As I've illustrated, there are plenty of points throughout Brianna's story that seem embellished or fabricated, but that doesn't mean she deserves to be blamed for something horrible like this. And I want to go on record, I don't think she should be. There are valid parts of Brianna's story to call attention to. This isn't one of them. And like I said, I bring it up specifically to stop any speculation that might happen in the comments or questions about why I don't explain it later. So with that out of the way, let's get back to some Gamergate-related happenings. Again, as loath as I am to source these dorks, sites like Bounding Into Comics were some of the only people noting Zoe Quinn's displeasure at Brianna's announcement in 2021 that Brianna had begun working on a Gamergate TV series. And I think that this TV series, which thankfully never materialized,
yeah, real. Yeah, so glad this shit never got made. Holy fuck.
In 2021, that Brianna had begun working on a Gamergate
I'm sure we all know about the Law and Order SVU Gamergate episode, right? We all know about this
series. And I think that this TV series, which thankfully never materialized and sounded awful, consisting entirely of fictional characters,
really epic,
is actually a really good capstone to understand how Brianna fits into Gamergate. Where people like Zoe and Anita tried to move on and have been vocal that they don't want to keep being defined By this period in their lives, Brianna continues to find ways to bring her involvement back into the spotlight and even attempts to continue monetizing it as part of her creative endeavors, like the ill-fated TV show. And if you thought Brianna, Zoe, and Anita had some kind of kindred bond, think again, as in these 2022 DMs I've received, Brianna shit-talks her fellow Gamergate targets, accusing them of being bad about trans people.
Everyone involved is traumatized. To be really honest, both Zoe and Anita were both really shitty to me. I haven't told either of them in years. Damn, not surprised trans people look at the brunt of things. Anita wasn't so great about trans people back then. I think she thought of herself as a main character, and I was speaking about what happened to them was distracting from her pain. Same with Zoe.
And trying to hog the spotlight, which is ironic, considering all Brianna did to be defined by Gamergate. But still, she didn't want to just be defined by Gamergate, as she writes in the self-aggrandizing 2015 article in The Guardian. Quote, I was at a bar a few weeks ago having drinks with a well-known journalist. Do you think my career is going to be defined by Gamergate? I asked him worriedly. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I think it depends on if you can pivot.
I'm a bit behind on the stream. I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel knowing that you and Nega Wu aren't so different after all?
Shut up. Fuck you. Thank you for the $40 though, Tol. Hugely appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hugely appreciate it for $40, but fuck you.
At some point, you need to use your raised profile to move on to new things. I'm taking that advice and pivoting. I'm sure the misogynist fringe of Gamergate will continue to make our lives hell in any way they can. They'll continue to threaten me and other women, intimidate and bully us, but at a certain point, we just have to get back to work. Besides, we make games, they make internet comments. Who really has the power? Indeed, so let's see what Brianna would pivot to next. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't making more video games.
Same as about her political career now. Rebellion, Rebellion Pack.
No surprise by now that Brianna's abrasive tendencies would isolate many people who should have been her natural allies. Even in those leaked group chats, we saw people seeing her as a loose cannon. And since Gamergate, she continued on her same trend of pushing away anyone who didn't fall in line, denying accountability and stretching the truth to the breaking point. As a result, when I reached out to people who used to work with her, they didn't have very many good things to say about her. We will get to their testimony more as we continue through Brianna's timeline, but here's a sneak peek. At their request, all interviewees have chosen to remain anonymous. From somebody who spent time working with Brianna during Progressive Victory. Quote, I would never work with her again, and I would advise...
Let's go. Okay, this is the real shit. This is the real shit. Let's go. Progressive Victory dirt. This is rubbing my fucking hands together right now. This my shit. This my shit.
Other people not to work with her, because I do think she's the kind of person who will use somebody and then spit them out the second they aren't useful or not willing to bootlick. My impression was she was going for people who at the very least wouldn't question her narratives. I despise the time I spent working with her. I've never despised working with someone else in my career. She was very incompetent. She seemed to lie a lot in a professional capacity. It was bizarre and off-putting, and I didn't like it, and I don't know anyone who worked underneath her or beside her who wound up having a positive experience.
Except Connor Counterpoints, who will grit his teeth and fucking bullshit as hard as possible about how great of a person she is. Oh, I just think that she had a very type A personality. She's a very type A personality. Shut up, man. Shut up, man. No, she is a nasty, control freak fucking liar, and you know it.
And
yeah, Kyla, not so erudite, is with her right now in Israel.
So with those to look forward to, we still have to get through Brianna's next chapter after Gamergate, running for Congress. Twice, technically. Brianna's political ambitions came on a wave of progressive sentiment that emerged after Trump's 2016 electoral win. And by several interviews, she seems to have aligned more with what she would eventually call the radical leftists. I want to call quick attention to this early interview Brianna did in 2017, where when asked about her roadmap other people should follow for getting involved in politics, she advocates running it like one of her startups. We remember her startup.
They said bootlickers like her, so that covers Connor and not so erudite. Well, good point.
That's right. It's also very funny that she would mention getting a lawyer to look at FEC rules when her campaign would fail to meet those standards for filing, but that's a little bit later. Again, however, we see Brianna's ever-present overconfidence, much like she took on the game.
She's going to mention the fact that the Progressive Victory filings got like every one of the streamers like docs or some shit, right?
With no experience, and started an animation startup with no experience. She pursued a congressional run with no actual political experience, even as a commentator. Unless you count a variety of articles with very little oversight, she had managed to get on a variety of websites in the years since 2014. I'd also not be doing my due diligence if I didn't mention her self-designed campaign logo. Like, all of those years in art school and being an artist had to be good for something, right?
Surely. Dude. Graphic design is my passion. Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Ah, well, alas. Relatively fresh from her Gamergate spotlight, Brianna got some press coverage for this congressional run, but it wouldn't translate to anything being actually done at the polls. In fact, she didn't make it past the Democratic primaries, meaning she didn't even get enough support to be put on an election ballot. She also forgot to file with the FEC or Federal Election Commission, as these publicly available documents show. And you might ask, well, even if she didn't have a lot of experience and the campaign didn't get very far, maybe she had good ideas. Her now infamous moon rocks tweet might provide some insight, where she pontificates about the tactical value of moon rocks dropped from the moon to Earth. I really, really want to think this is just an incredibly deadpan joke. That's not exactly her style and would be odd to make during an attempted campaign. For further proof of her political...
Wait, the doc story address is coming... Wait. DeadDomain just puts Brianna's address in the video? What? No way,
insights,
right?
I'd point you to this campaign appearance she made in Massachusetts. She starts by selling herself as having spent her entire life in software engineering
try and skip
before
that?
jumping
Dude,
right into talking about Russia hacking the US and our infrastructure. Again, she wasn't really in software engineering, and certainly wasn't for her whole life.
I've spent my entire life working in software engineering. If you've been watching the news at all today, you can see that we're having quite a few problems with Russia, information warfare, bot warfare, having our infrastructure hacked. There's even a story last week that came out that was showing how actually Russia had penetrated our power plants here in the United States.
She essentially humble brags here about having a Law and Order episode based on her life next, and then brings up that she worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, this is an aside that we will talk about more once we get to Brianna's current crop of...
Apparently there's a comment on this video that DeadDomain's put that says, DeadDomain is saying that Brianna Wu is arguably the most dishonest person on any side of Gamergate.
Podcast appearances, including her Dollcast podcast. But one thing I've noticed is that when speaking off the cuff, Brianna
base W take
to name drop famous people, even when it has little to no bearing on the conversation. So just put a pin in that. This was one of the first times I'd actually seen Brianna speak, and it was really a moment where everything snapped into place for me. She talks a bit about how we need to get big, unaccountable, dark money groups out of politics, which would be very funny in a minute. All of the questions at the beginning are bizarrely given by her husband, Frank, where she mentions also some of her friends she knew served in the Iraq War.
So today is the 15th anniversary of the invasion in Iraq. 4,000 Americans died, 100,000 Iraqis, maybe more, died. I know that you had you knew people.
You're doing a great job, Frank.
There,
I love Frank.
Sacrificed a lot.
I'm a Frank supporter.
So, I think more than anything else has happened in my lifetime. The Iraq
You're doing a great
War
job, bro.
is really what defined me as a person. And I'm going to tear up here because I had people I deeply cared about that gave their lives in that war.
This bitch always
and
be
it was
crying.
15 years ago today that we invaded Iraq.
Were these people real? Use your best judgment at this point. I'd honestly like to give Brianna any kind of leeway, especially when she's telling anecdotal stories about people who suffered in the war, but I can't, especially after literally everything she's done. But I want to talk about Frank. See, essentially she uses him as a
Frank segment? Let's fucking go.
Surrogate for fielding questions throughout, and actually takes one from the crowd towards the end of the video, but it comes off as odd and stilted. Why not just take questions from the crowd the whole time if that's who you're here to engage? The answer is probably because for Brianna, That no longer makes it a controlled environment where she can bounce between pre-decided talking points like her Iraq war friends and Gamergate harassment experience. And without those talking points, she's not able to name drop and verify her experience as much to a crowd who doesn't know who she is. And also because when she answers a question off book, it goes something like this.
Also, continuing the conversation about the climate change issue.
Absolutely.
A lot of the conversations around renewable energies, looking for hopefully best available technologies.
I've seen nano machines that have the potential to solve some of this.
I think the $2 mic sticker check. What you mean, the like hell of a boss or whatever it is sticker that DeadDomain's got on the microphone that you're talking about.
Someone about this. I want to tell you, I am in Silicon Valley a lot, and I speak at MIT a lot. I've never seen a solution yet for that, but I do know we've got to really double down and quadruple.
Was the nano machines mentioned?
To get us.
Conversation about the climate change issue.
Absolutely.
A lot of the conversations around renewable energies, looking for hopefully best available technologies.
I've seen nano machines that have the potential to solve some of this. I was actually on a jet the other day and talking to someone about this. I want to tell you, I am in Silicon Valley a lot, and I speak at MIT a lot. I've never seen a solution yet for that, but I do know we've got to really double down and quadruple down on our science to get us there. Trump is slashing the NHS. We're slashing scientific funding. So it...
Okay. I'm going to switch over to the other screen so that Jimbley's donor gets read out. Let's hear it.
My sweet waifu Brianna, I love you so much, please throw me around our bedroom like Furetha.
Thank you, Jimbley, for the $10. Hugely appreciated. Thank you.
Frustrates me that my industry, technology, is often seeking out how to do better shaders for guns in video games or doing things that seem kind of superfluous to me.
Jimbley guy's fucked, man.
Congressional run. This was in 2018, and her candidacy, as I mentioned, would go nowhere, despite reportedly raising over $200,000 in funds, according to Open Secrets. According to that same website, the funding source seems to be pretty divided between donations and cash funding, not unlikely from Frank Wu. Yet, in 2020, Brianna would run again and receive over $200,000 in donations for Brianna Wu for Congress, including contributions from both her campaign and from Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, who is running for Congress as well. I'll talk more about their link in a moment. The thing is, Brianna didn't even make it as far into the primaries as last time, dropping out and citing the ongoing COVID pandemic at the time. In her traditional Brianna fashion we've come to know and loathe by now, in a Medium post that signaled the end of her so far final political race, she went on to detail a very likely fictionalized, though still sensationalized, story that, similarly to her story years earlier, would just so happen to perfectly represent a moment in her life and culture as a whole.
Brianna and the NHS killed MF Doom with nanomachine. Thank you, Starbash.
Straight to make a point. Think back to that story about seeing the little girl on her motorcycle. But when you look at the actual expenses of Brianna's candidacy, I can't help but ask the question, then where did almost $300,000 in donations go? Which might give you even more deja vu to Brianna's other projects and suspicious monetary incidents like the Kickstarter money that went to a non-existent person, and of course her startup at 19, that went nowhere. In fact, when you count up some estimates between the combined campaign costs of about $500,000, $200,000 for the animation studio, and an estimate of more than $400,000 for Revolution 60, Brianna's hit-to-miss ratio is like over $1 million in expenses across her career with almost nothing meaningful to show for it, let alone revenue to reflect the expenditures. Now, thankfully, much of what's been spent by the 2020 Wu campaign is publicly available on the FEC website. There are a handful of odd expenditures that might raise eyebrows, like the contributions giving Frank Wu almost $900 for travel expenses. Two other big payees, the Insurrection Inc. and Casale Keller Consulting, were paid in the several thousands and are consulting firms that purport to be against big money in Washington. So, I guess that's not big money by Washington standards. Many of the expenses are innocuous, like Stamps.com and payments to Squarespace. But then they show several expenditures from the campaign to both Brianna Wu herself and Rebellion PAC, a political action group started by Wu and Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Rebellion PAC described itself as, quote, a clean PAC fighting for progressive working class values across the country. Rebellion PAC is electing leaders who fight for working class values and against wealth inequality. We are a hybrid PAC
this isn't Eden is online. Eden is online, not Ethan, you fucking transphobe. First of all, this isn't that person. Okay. Thank you for the $10. And yeah, this is a pretty good takedown right now. And I think, really, the best stuff is still yet to come. We haven't really covered the Keffals leaks yet. Apparently, Keffals has given over a bunch of, like, signal messages and lawyer correspondence.
At the federal, state, and local level. We unapologetically stand for civil rights, gender equality, and LGBT rights. Welcome to a stronger America. Welcome to the rebellion. Notably, this rebellion has now metastasized into a politically adrift money fund attached to Cenk, who has taken a broadly centrist turn and even appeared at a Turning Point USA event earlier this year. And Brianna, who in stark contrast with previous advocation against political PACs and dark money, now spends her days ranting about how trans people need to cut community with non-binary people, or really just any trans person she doesn't think meets her weird, arbitrary definitions. Don't worry, we're getting there. Hold on, it's been a long journey, I know. But that brings us to Brianna's actions since 2020, which have been the Rebellion PAC with Cenk and a stint at another political action group, Progressive Victory, and that's about it. Brianna was at the Progressive Victory PAC from roughly December 2023 to 2024, apparently working alongside Destiny and Vosh, until she suddenly left. The PAC was simply organized to push Democrat canvassing efforts during the 2024 season, from everything I've seen. Interestingly, in some group chats I've been provided with, she still shit-talks people like Destiny in private, at least she did in 2022, where she described hate watching his content, called him a narcissist, and she'd also go on to privately praise his Twitter account being suspended, saying, "Rip Bozo." Now, none of this would stop her from collabing with him 2 years later, so much for standards. The official Destiny wiki cites her leaving over a different vision for the PAC. If I had to guess, this is another case of Brianna being hard to work with on group projects, which should feel familiar if you remember the Gamergate era group chats she was mentioned in and the testimony of people who used to work at her game studio. But I don't need to speculate. In fact, I know exactly that's what happened because I spoke to someone else who worked directly with Brianna on Progressive Victory. And they attest to her not only constantly shifting the blame, not putting in her portion of the work, but also being vindictive and unnecessarily rude. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna.
Okay, here we go. Real shit, real shit.
At Progressive Victory. Quote, "This is just my experience having worked with her. It was really bad. There were instances where she made other people on the team cry. How? Just kind of an abusive approach to management. There was a time I was brought into a meeting and she asked, 'Why am I not able to get a good emotional read on you?' And I was like, 'I don't know, I'm on the spectrum.' And I had to walk her through what autistic people experience in this meeting. And it felt really intrusive and gross. It was on the heels of another person on the team. They had come out of a meeting in tears and they told me about it. People were just very on edge around her, and even at the time, did not fully seem to trust her. They talk about how she was barely available and would shift the blame and didn't really actually seem to care that much about the work she was doing there. Quote, "She was supposed to be in charge of this project and effort, and she skipped half of the check-in meetings and was AWOL for a good portion of what I had been brought on to help with.
Dude.
Whenever she did get involved, it wound up being kind of a disaster. For example, when Progressive Victory would ask why we aren't meeting these goals, it would become my fault, even though I was doing what she had been telling me to do. And I assume
it's
no
just
additional
awesome knowing that the whole time I was sitting here talking crazy, being like, it's so retarded to bring Brianna Wu into this. How fucking stupid are these people? This is a complete shit show. This shit sucks. Progressive Victory fucking blows. Everyone's coping. They're all coping. I was just right the whole time. I was right the whole time. And fucking retarded losers, like counterpoints, like counterpoints, are going to sit there and go, oh, well, we got 4 Gorillion voter datas. We got 4 Gorillion voter datas. So actually, it worked out in the end. It's like, no, it was a complete shit show. And you know it was a complete shit show.
It's meant keep doing what you're doing. She always found a way to make something somebody else's fault when it was clearly on her plate and clearly her screw-up. My last interaction with Brianna Wu, essentially it was the last day of my contract. We get on a meeting and she's like, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, and I had been pulling my weight and she had not been showing up to our meetings. She had a conversation with someone higher up in Progressive Victory calling her out on that, so she was really upset with me. So I was like, okay, I can do these things, but just so you know, it's the last day of my contract. I'm not going to be renewing. And she was like, oh, okay. I hate working with you. And hung up the call. End quote. Now, Brianna hasn't stopped using her political expertise.
What?
And she had not been showing up to our meetings.
Last day of my contract, we got on a meeting. She's like, you got to do this. You got to do this. I've been pulling my weight. And she had not been showing up to meetings. And she had a conversation with higher up in Progressive Victory calling her out on that. So she's really upset
She had
with
a
me.
conversation with someone higher up in Progressive Victory calling her out on that. So she was really upset with me. So I was like, okay, I can do these things, but just so you know, it's the last day of my contract. I'm not going to be renewing. And she was like, oh, okay. I hate working with you. And hung up the call. End quote. Now, Brianna hasn't stopped using her political expertise and her positions on these PACs to continue getting new spots on podcasts or, you know, citing these experiences, very loose quotations, on her shows like The Dollcast, while continually drifting further to the right, at least in regards to the two primary issues she busies herself with these days.
Dollcast mention.
Zionism and trans healthcare. Don't worry, we're going to get to Brianna's cuddling up to turfs and the unknowable bridges she's burnt in pursuit of her latest spotlight, but I want to go back to Rebellion PAC for a second. What does Rebellion PAC actually do? According to the FEC, which lists Brianna as the PAC's treasurer,
Okay, fucking hell, okay. We get it.
That seemed to never materialize, and when asked for her sources, often responds by saying she gets her information from quote-unquote looking at polling. Now, it turns out that's probably from Rebellion PAC's relationship with vendors like Digital Strategy Group, which received over $100,000 from the PAC in 2024. Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson. Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson, who also own
Editing mistake? Editing mistake detected?
Rebellion PAC's relationship with vendors like Digital Strategy Group, which received over $100,000 from the PAC in 2024. Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson. Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson, who also own 1983 Labs LLC, which is a company that specializes in polling.
DeadDomain lost.
Is this connecting a dot? I don't know. But I think it's interesting when Brianna apparently repeatedly talks so much about how she values and studies polls. Because honestly...
So, I mean, there's a whole lot concrete here. It's a lot of... I will say this isn't very concrete. It's sort of just questioning and prodding about how the money was spent, which I would love to see investigated, frankly.
I couldn't tell you what the fuck else Rebellion PAC could possibly be doing. Judging solely by the dead social media pages that haven't posted in 3 years, I think it's safe to say they aren't making a big push, or at least didn't during the election. And I'm not the only one wondering this. This Medium post from Andrew Landra, a DC political consultant, is possibly an insight into Rebellion PAC and Brianna. He starts off by expressing concern for Brianna, depicting her as someone he's long defended and spoken highly of behind closed doors. Then he goes on to detail his questions to Brianna.
Turning to Brianna Wu data mining. What is this? Over this event sailed, I do fundraising for a living. I have a Discord. I could list match with a data broker and find an uncomfortable amount about what articles you read. If you're worried about over surveillance, you should want more regulation, not less. What am I supposed to take from this? I mean, she's misspelling over surveillance. She's misspelling surveillance. They're forcing you to log in with Discord using Progressive Victory. Just interesting.
About Rebellion PAC, questioning its dedication to fighting dark money when much of its output was unaccountable, asking Brianna in polite terms to illustrate what the PAC has actually accomplished and what candidates it supported. Andrew notes two of the largest contributors are Zeta Global and Digital Strategy Group, asking what they do and why they donate to Rebellion. Zeta Global is a marketing company, and like we mentioned, Digital Strategy Group is another consultant company. He wanted to get the record straight, and Brianna's response was essentially, not unless I have full editorial control. Keep this in mind for some of the other podcasts and her current opinions as we dive into them in a few minutes. During a conversation with Eli Ehrlich for an entirely different video, she also gave me some insight into Brianna's business style.
She actually reached out to me to help with the lawsuit, like, I want to say like 2 years ago, and was very kind, very supportive. She did not give a shit that I was saying that I would help people access hormones. And since then, I think she's picked up that she can get a lot of attention and a lot of money from
Well, yeah, Brianna was like literally Brianna before the Keffals stuff like really blew up with the Mutahar video when that all came crashing down. She was like defending like fucking bathtub HRT and shit.
From going on this right-wing grift tour. It's such an intense pivot. It's fascinating. I don't think that she really necessarily believes all of it. But I think that she's scared. She's scared of the current administration, and she thinks that throwing all other trans people under the bus will help her personally. I feel like her politics are evolving by the day as she gets more publicity and attention. It does seem to align
I just saw Palestinian kids trying to stone a dog to
style.
death. I just saw a bunch of savage Palestinian kids trying to stone some dog to death. It's disgusting, dude. So absurd.
I mean, she quite famously laundered hundreds of thousands of dollars using her political PAC and has a penchant for attention. I mean, also, this is a multimillionaire. She has no.
I just saw a
real
Haitian
worries
pick
in
a
the
cat
world.
up off the street and bite its head off.
As we see with Andrew Landra and countless times in the past, Brianna doesn't like being called out. It doesn't matter how suspicious something might look. It doesn't matter how many times she's had suspicious things happen near her. She really doesn't take any kind of accountability, always foisting the blame elsewhere or failing that, just ignoring the problem until it goes away. Now, despite never making any impact in any field she's ever been in, from writing to animation to game design to politics, she continues to wear all this massive amount of experience on her sleeve. She then uses this experience to get more exposure and spots on talk shows where she can authoritatively talk about politics because she's been a candidate. You see, she's part of Rebellion PAC. She must know what the fuck she's talking about. Insert callbacks for moon rocks, nanomachines, etc. From everyone I've spoken to, it seems like Brianna has mostly made it as far as she has by simply faking it until she makes it, relying on the trust of others to not question her or her narratives. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna, specific details have been withheld to preserve anonymity. Quote, hearing her selling herself, her pitch was basically, well, I'm different because I have actual experience. And that was appealing because it seems like there's such a lack of experience-based perspective in the online political world. She spoke about her experiences in a way that did not initially set off my bullshit alarm, at least for quite a while.
Like, how dumb do you have to be? Truly, I don't understand how dumb can you be? How dumb do you have to be to not have your bullshit detector going off when you hear Brianna talk? It's like so blatant. It's not tricky. She's not sophisticated, truly.
We had very similar political...
Like, most people believe it because they want to. I feel like most people believe Brianna because they want to. She's like offering something or selling the idea of something they want to use, basically. Whether that's gamers are these radical right-wing lunatics, or and then there's like some journo that wants to push that, or there's a Connor Points who wants to use the grift. Yeah, exactly. It's really not tricky to figure out. The only people that get stuck in are the people who want to.
Perspectives. I think I was blinded by the trust that she actually did so many of the things she claims to have done. Over time, I started to get more suspicious, and seeing how she was responding to certain controversies, I tried to do my own research on who she is and what she's actually accomplished in any of the organizations and roles she's claimed to have been successful in. With her, I was looking for reasons to believe she was who I thought she was. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was hoping I would look it up and find evidence of what she's claimed to have done. I even said that I said, hey, I'm getting the feeling increasingly like she either hasn't done the things she says she's done, or she's really bad at communicating it. I don't have anything concrete about her. I've looked for it, and it's always just stories and just trust me. And because of her attempts to appeal to a more centrist right-wing audience and her now trademark inability to take any criticism, at least from the left, Brianna Wu has spent the last few years making more enemies than friends. Because more than anything she does now, Brianna excels at alienating and pushing away people. And at this point, I don't think she can help it. Like the film project she was brought on, and then like a month later, they released a public statement distancing themselves from her. Now, publicly, she's been adamantly vicious about her stances on trans healthcare and her support of Israel's ongoing civilian genocide in Gaza. But she likes to couch this all in a pragmatic approach, that she's a serious political operative who really looks at the landscape and knows which way the wind is blowing. But behind closed doors, or at least in DMs, she's a bitch of a different color. One that seems to relish being mean-spirited and tries constantly to wrangle others to fall in line with what she wants. One of the more notable examples had to do with her playing the role of a high school mean girl in leaked DMs about Bonnie, a trans woman formerly with TYT, when Bonnie was early in transition. In those same leaked DMs, Brianna would agree that pronouns had been pushed to insanity and say Bonnie looked like a transvestite, while agreeing that non-binary people were partly to blame for the anti-trans social shift. This, despite previous stances where she claimed to unequivocally support non-binary people. You see, these texts are just vicious bullying. By the way, there's no excuse for them. These DMs came out in 2023, preceding the more broad right-wing appeal she's been aiming for, but they very publicly showed Brianna to be, at best, someone who advocated for things publicly she didn't believe in privately, and at worst, was an opportunistic liar. Well, Brianna would try and save some face by saying the leaked photos were out of context and limply try and take some form of accountability once she's actually backed into a corner. This kind of mean girl gossip is a common occurrence with her. In other DMs, like this leaked Signal chat, she calls out other activists like Alejandra Caraballo as toxic, citing everyone Brianna knows who's worked with her. In that same breath...
So I was just totally letting this run. So I literally started reading something. I totally ADHD'd out. I'm running this video back. I totally spazzed out, ADHD'd out. I was reading some
Israel's
shit.
ongoing civilian genocide. It's just a point. I don't think she can help it. Like the film project she was brought on, and then like a month later, they released a public statement distancing themselves from her. Now, publicly, she's been adamantly vicious about her stances on trans healthcare and her support of Israel's ongoing civilian genocide in Gaza. But she likes to couch this all in a pragmatic approach, that she's a serious political operative who really looks at the landscape and knows which way the wind is blowing. But behind closed doors, or at least in DMs, she's a bitch of a different color. One that seems to relish being mean-spirited and tries constantly to wrangle others to fall in line with what she wants. One of the more notable examples had to do with her playing the role of a high school mean girl in leaked DMs about Bonnie, a trans woman formerly with TYT.
You got 30 minutes till Gura graduation mogs you tonight, Kui.
Oh no, not the Gura graduation. Oh no. Many people have been speculating that small hands are a sign of autism. Many people have been saying
When
this.
Bonnie was early in transition. In those same leaked DMs, Brianna would agree that pronouns had been pushed to insanity and say Bonnie looked like a transvestite, while agreeing that non-binary people were partly to blame for the anti-trans social shift. This, despite previous stances where she claimed to unequivocally support non-binary people. You see, these texts are just vicious bullying. By the way, there's no excuse for them. These DMs came out...
Classic Sunday leak there.
...in 2023, preceding the more broad right-wing appeal she's been aiming for. But they very publicly showed Brianna to be, at best, someone who advocated for things publicly she didn't believe in privately, and at worst, was an opportunistic liar. Well, Brianna would try and save some face by saying the leaked photos were out of context, and limply try and take some form of accountability once she's actually backed into a corner. This kind of mean girl gossip is a common occurrence with her. In other DMs, like this leaked Signal chat, she calls out other activists like Alejandra Caraballo as toxic, citing everyone Brianna knows who's worked with her. In that same breath, she accuses Aaron Reed of being cut from a toxic cloth and says that a group she's part of lacks integrity. We saw earlier how she shit-talked Destiny, but that's not the only person she worked with that she'd be disparaging of, as she, in these same Signal chats, would claim Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks has shitty opinions and called into question his choices like a presidential run. I've redacted the names here, so if Brianna watches this, she might just know who these are from.
Okay, so let's read these.
Chats would claim the only person
we read
part
this at
of
the start.
left. She accuses Aaron Reed of being cut from a toxic cloth and says that a group she's part of lacks integrity. We saw earlier how she shit-talked Destiny, but that's not the only person she worked with that she'd be disparaging of, as she, in these same Signal chats, would claim Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks has shitty opinions and called into question his choices like a presidential run.
I wish Cenk weren't running for president right now, as Piers Morgan hit was 10 out of 10. He master blasted Israel's foreign policy, but was much more sophisticated than Hassan's statements. I could be focused on amplifying that. Instead, I'm trying to do a spinning plate dance of fundraising, coalition building, and keeping my integrity. So can I bring business? Yeah, what's up? I operate. I have several loose mission objectives that I work on. I work on them as I have meetings. The next 3 months are about fundraising. My mission objective I had with any was looking for funding of your ML work. So that she was talking to any, who was a Keffals moderator. The Keffals moderator. Dude, this is such a deep cut. What was Annie was in a clip talking to Denims at TwitchCon discussing the party where Keffals walked up to Melina and said, if your husband doesn't stop harassing me, I'm going to get his YouTube channel taken down too. Or some shit like that, right?
I've redacted the names here, so if Brianna watches this, she might just know who these are from, or she might have just lost track of all the people she's threatened and disparaged and talked shit about. I think that's probably the more likely answer. Either way, I received several messages and DMs from other prominent members of the trans and queer community in several messages.
It's not education. You're reframing trans issues from the non-partisan healthcare issue that's been for the last 30 years into lunatic fringe communism. Makes it impossible for me to do my job. Just hold on to the victim complex for 2 seconds and express yourself clearly. Okay.
And DMs from other prominent members of the trans and queer community interacting directly with Brianna. These texts show who Brianna really is, how she tries to pressure others to fall in line with her political ambitions.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of these before.
Brianna really...
What? So this is to Lav. This is talking to Lav. Lav, what you should really be asking yourself is this. Brianna is one of the most well-known experts in America about online abuse and women's issues online. Why is she not on my side? That's a question you should really spend some time thinking about. You're not going to get better until you understand that you are the villain.
Really is how she tries to pressure others to fall in line with her political ambitions.
All I need is for you to stop attacking me personally. I talk about the stuff I do because I care. It doesn't, I mean, critics make it harder.
Ambitions. She constantly tries to leverage others to agree with her, never attempting to be sympathetic to their point of view, if it won't gain her something. On a personal level, I think these DMs show a genuine lack of empathy on Brianna's part.
You think?
Where she seems so blinded by her my way or the highway attitude, she ignores the experiences and ideas of others consistently. So by now we have a pretty consistent portrait of Brianna as someone who will bully others, shift blame, and deny most accountability, all the while touting experience and connections she really seems to just not have. It shouldn't surprise you that she is also trying to engage in hiring people to gather information on who she deems her political opponents. And I have the texts and emails to prove it. From another anonymous source, in 2023, Brianna attempted to hire someone to compile information on political targets like Jackson Hinkle, offering thousands of dollars for essentially a bounty for people she didn't agree with. I do want to note that oppo research, or oppositional research, is a pretty common practice in Washington, D.C. political and lobbyist circles. But the way Brianna claims to go about it here, lobbyist circles. But the way Brianna
so we read these before.
Dollars information on political targets like Jackson Hinkle, offering thousands of dollars for essentially a bounty for people she didn't agree with. I do want to note that oppo research, or oppositional research, is a pretty common practice in Washington, D.C. political and lobbyist circles. But the way Brianna claims to go about it here is just so bizarre.
By the way, I have a meeting with Brianna next week. She's supposed to be focused on Hinkle. The more I think about it, the more I think that tweet is no reason to end the relationship, because I still don't think it would be easy to trace back to you. Yeah, once cooled down, I didn't care. She cares, that's annoying, but she gets separation due to her behind regardless. Okay.
I can't imagine anybody normally familiar with oppositional research and how dossiers like that are put together
Brianna offer is so low, Lumfell. Makes you disappointed. She offered 2K a month. They need to know how much work she's expecting for some amount of money. Just got off streaming to eat and relax for a bit. This is Keffals.
Would look at this and be like, yeah, that's a completely normal way to go about business. She even went so far as to consult her lawyer for how to pay.
Foreign streamer. Following, it's unfortunate with a grey area. Well, it'll be clearly permissible for a foreign national to do research for us, and we determine how to do that research. There's never been a case where a PAC or campaign has paid a foreign national to disseminate communications, since they'd have a say on what they're literally saying, paid for by the PAC. I'd recommend against this as proposed. Is there potentially a way to keep the research internal when we disseminate communications? Is it ultimately their risk as well?
For the person she was trying to commission, I actually really like this letter from her lawyer, by the way, because it's written in the nicest legalese way. That seems like the lawyer is just trying to say, hey, don't. Now, being the masterful political operator she is, if you need more evidence that Brianna was behind this, she said this in a Twitter post in November 2023.
You'll be calling streamers, someone with an ability to fundraise, an understanding of federal election law, funding an opposition research team with the best people digging up dirt and changing conversation after the actual foreign agents and fashion.
In other messages, she claims to have already done this in the past, paying quite a sum for dirt on people who aren't named, though she gives an estimate between $5,000 and $20,000 she's previously paid for these dossiers, leading me to think there's been multiple? Now, is this Brianna weaving another strand in her ever-expanding web of bullshit? I don't know, honestly. If she was willing to go far enough to consult a lawyer on this, I don't see why she wouldn't have paid for this kind of thing in the past. If it was revealed that Brianna did intend to use these dossiers for blackmail or extortion, which is honestly the only reason I could see her doing this, it would have been insanely illegal. As not only is blackmail illegal, but Brianna likely would have been using funds from Progressive Victory and or Rebellion.
What the snark subreddit are using the term Bel Air pogroms?
With Brianna, I have no idea.
Was that Chris or Hody that started saying that?
If all of this is bullshit.
I can't remember.
Like, she could have absolutely just been lying to this person and giving them inflated hopes for something that never would have materialized in the first place. And I can't help but wonder again, why? Brianna is not an elected rep. She's not even running for anything. She has a cushy job where she seems to barely do anything, but also can't stand opposition and loves to target people who disagree with her. Was she doing this for blackmail? Was she trying to extort someone? Why Jackson Hinkle? There are so many other questions that this leads us to, but the ineffable conclusion is Brianna is a snake who seems to see herself as some masterful political manipulator. I want to preface the last few sections of this video with these DMs and accounts of Brianna behind the scenes, because I think, along with everything else we've dug through together by now, they paint a cohesive picture of who Brianna is.
I'm staying at Parry's house, pull up. Should we do that? Should we go to Malta? Should we IRL stream in Malta? How awesome would that be?
And even with all the plastic surgery she loves to show off, like Dorian Gray, that illustration is anything but pretty. See, modern Brianna Wu isn't just someone who tries to force...
Do they even have good enough mobile data in Malta to IRL stream
others behind the scenes to step in line with her while making snide jokes she thinks nobody is listening to? I want to preface the last few sections of this video with these DMs and accounts of Brianna behind the scenes, because I think, along with everything else we've dug through together by now, they paint a cohesive picture of who Brianna is. And even with all the plastic surgery she loves to show off, like Dorian Gray, that illustration is anything but pretty. See, modern Brianna Wu isn't just someone who tries to force others behind the scenes to step in line with her while making snide jokes she thinks nobody is listening to. She's also taken, as I've mentioned several times now, a broad approach to trans ideology in an attempt to endear herself to more conservative minds. This includes hanging out with noted racist and white supremacist leaner Lauren Southern as the two checked out Brianna...
White supremacist Lena. Was it leader or Lena?
In an attempt to endear herself to more conservative minds. This includes hanging out with noted racist and white supremacist leaner Lauren Southern as the two checked out Brianna's Porsche collection. I need to mention this so you don't forget that Brianna is still fucking incredibly rich, apparently, as she continues to talk about and try to represent the struggles of a community that overwhelmingly isn't. Speaking of being part of a community, or lack thereof, Brianna publicly came out as trans in 2014, and collectively,
Also, guys, now is a great time. I'm going to do a quick shill. Guys, 515 people watching, 124 likes on stream. Some of those 400 people wouldn't mind please moving the cursor thumbs up and clicking it, or pressing a thumbs up on their mobile device. That'd be hugely appreciated. Now, if you want to take your support one step further, you can donate directly through a stream elements link in the pinned chat message. You can also buy membership to the channel, gift a membership to the channel, gift a whole bunch of memberships to the channel randomly throughout the chat, buy a super chat which will highlight a message and read out on TTS, or buy a super sticker which is a YouTube image or gift that will be highlighted in chat and I'll describe it to you. You can go to discord.gg/Kuihman, twitter.com/Kuihman, or reddit.com/r/Kuihman. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, you can now watch on twitch.tv/Kuihman if you so choose. Yeah, this video, the Synthetic Man video is surprisingly good too. The one DeadDomain did ages ago. That was like a good, you know, you don't expect it to be good because it's a trans bread tube video essayist making a hit piece on someone who's either centrist or leaning right, or in Synthetic Man's case, a giga incel. So you expect it to be like bemoaning like horrible misogyny and all this shit, but it doesn't. It keeps it pretty, you know, to the facts and hard criticisms.
Everyone just kind of went, yeah, we know. And along the ride, there's been no shortage of fun tweets. Remember the KKK one? Notably, she's also buddied up to Richard Hanania. Now, Richard is your garden variety pseudo-intellectual who likes to use flowery prose to make basic observations about society seem profound. He's like a living version of those Facebook memes with someone's face chained to their phone, except he's also racist. He's written positively in the past about race science and eugenics, but most telling, I feel, about Richard was the time he shared a video of Grand Theft Auto 5 and thought it was maybe a real terrorist attack in Los Angeles. He deleted it, but unfortunately the internet doesn't forget. I've always found the best way to explain.
Wait, can we not see the Grand Theft Auto video? I want to see the Grand Theft Auto video that he shared.
Is to let them say it themselves. To that end, I've listened now to over a dozen hours of Brianna's various appearances on shows like Trigonometry and The Dollcast to bring you her opinions in her own words without the Twitter character count. Now, let's talk about The Dollcast. In 2024, Brianna attempted not to just rebrand herself, but craft a rebranded trans rights movement. Not my words. This is the description of The Dollcast, a podcast featuring 4 trans women. Quote, Dollcast is the trans rights reboot, less extreme, more thoughtful, and willing to have fearless conversations. As of writing, this podcast has been around for about 6 months and has less than 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's a wonder why when trans rights are constantly under attack by conservatives, and the only conversations Brianna seems to fear.
Yo, thank you for the is that Astro? I assume the name is there. Astro for the $3.99 pair character holding out coffee super sticker. Huge appreciated.
Fearlessly care about is with Dick.
Must watching Kuihman shit. Why?
Reboot.
Why'd you say that?
In 2024, Brianna attempted not to just rebrand herself, but craft a rebranded trans rights movement. Not my words. This is the description of The Dollcast, a podcast featuring 4 trans women. Quote, Dollcast is the trans rights reboot, less extreme, more thoughtful, and willing to have fearless conversations. As of writing, this podcast has been around for about 6 months and has less than 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's a wonder why when trans rights are constantly under attack by conservatives, and the only conversations Brianna seems to fearlessly care about is with dickheads like Richard Hanania. But more than her personal quirks, I want to talk about Dollcast because it represents Brianna's modern trans rights takes as well. And by which I mean it's essentially a group of incredibly sheltered and privileged women talking shit about anyone they don't feel adequately passes. They're purity tests for who really is or isn't transgender. Brianna also has a preoccupation with targeting non-binary people, and particularly transmasc and transmasc non-binary people buying into explicit TERF talking points, with no pushback from the other hosts.
That trans ad that is playing, I live in Massachusetts and it is on the air every 4 seconds. I was walking out of the bathroom at the movie theater the other day and this ad comes on the air and it's got like a trans woman with a very deep voice, and then it shows, you know, Rachel Levine, and then it shows a bunch of drag queens, you know, and then it goes into, you know, Kamala Harris wants gender affirming surgery for prisoners, and then, you know, it ends with the tagline like Trump is for us, Kamala is for they, them. It's using these caricatures of trans women as drag queens and then using us to scare the public and then linking like a bunch of ideas together, like drag queens, trans women, you know, non-binary people into the soup to basically make people hate us. And it's a really dispiriting thing to see an election about, this explosion of very young children that are non-binary. I've got a really good friend of mine. He was telling me with the class, they were having a coming out day, and like half the class was raising their hand, not saying, hi, I'm gay or lesbian, but I'm non-binary. And it's not that I'm saying I don't think that they're going through something real there. I'm saying that just pragmatically, if you've got armies of these kids coming out in schools, it is scaring the parents.
But maybe she's got some incisive political commentary to offer, what with having 2 congressional campaigns. If you thought that, those notions should be quickly dispelled. Episode 1 sees her basically blaming Democrats, kowtowing to radical progressives for trans visibility, and in a roundabout way blames gender activists for the conservative victory and their fixation on criminalizing transness.
Like all 5 of us agree that this maximalist view on trans issues, this isn't what we want from the Democratic Party. What I find really frustrating is, you know, I'm a little older than y'all are. In the trans movement, like how we got all these rights was going very slowly, piece by piece, and getting buy-in from the wider public. Like something I tweeted out last week was a copy of my Virginia birth certificate, which has been changed after I got GRS to female, right? That is an accommodation that was put into law. It took time. There was buy-in from the public. What I think has happened in the last 5 years is a lot of the trans activists have convinced Democratic lawmakers of this maximalist vision of trans liberation that essentially comes to, it's a bunch of policy positions that turn the public against us.
Yes, it's the gender activists advocating for their rights in healthcare, and not at all the pocket industry of conservatives dedicated to painting a target on a marginalized group, as the Democrats did literally nothing to stem the tide of hate. You just, you're such a good political maverick, Brianna.
Oh, and I've had so...
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is there. Because I don't think the progressives, I don't think the Dems lost the election because of stuff like trans healthcare. I don't think that's the case. I think it is a good wedge issue. But like, would they, like, let's say they took a harder line on trans stuff, started really fighting all those battles, that probably would nuke them, to be honest. I think the best messaging on it is basically like, with the way the UK is heading right now. They should be, trans people should be protected as trans people. They have rights as people and rights to the way they should be treated in society, and they shouldn't be subject to discrimination and bigotry and all this stuff. However, simultaneously, the extremities of trans advocacy, wanting to lean towards this sort of like wanton handing out of prescriptions and quick surgeries and stuff like that, it is not intelligent, and we should have a more hesitant and evaluative approach to it. I think that is the messaging, really. It's like a stick to the live and let live messaging, you know? Stick to that. I think getting on the super hardcore defensive or even offensive over trans stuff is a total L from Dems if they try to do that.
So many conversations with people. They don't like Trump, but they don't like the Democratic elitists more. They hate us more. They hate progressives more. They hate the people that announce their pronouns more. They hate the people that do land acknowledgments more. Culture in the Democratic Party that I've had a front seat to. And this is how it works. Someone will go to a focus group and they will sit down and say, well, if you want to talk to Black people, here's how you do it. Use these words. You want to talk to women? Go use these words. You want to talk to Latinos? Use these words. And what ends up coming is you're like a robot trying to go down the list and please every single member of the coalition.
This is another common occurrence for Mana Brianna to cite her political experience and say, trust me, the Democrats are taking this woke DEI stuff too far. This position has a few uses for her. It allows her to get more conservative voices to listen to her, to even see her as a reasonable trans voice, and it also allows her to further cite that experience when the Democrats inevitably fail at their flaccid electoralism attempts. The problem is that while this might be a useful talking point for Brianna, it's not based in reality, and probably more damning is actually just reciting the conservative framing on these issues back to them. See, she's accepting the ideas being pushed by people like Matt Walsh, Libs of TikTok, Charlie Kirk, and
you can say trans people should have healthcare and that's all, but that takes many different forms for different people. Right? And that's where the issues come up.
It doesn't other slightly machine.
But there are some people who straight up don't think there should be trans healthcare, sure. There are some conservatives that are straight up like, yeah, there shouldn't be hormones handed out for stuff. There shouldn't be surgeries. It shouldn't happen. Period. There are some people like that. But broadly, in the reasonable discussion, people agree there should be some level, but they disagree on how well backed certain interventions are at certain stages in life, how available it should be, what precautions should be taken before giving someone the medical interventions. It's about stuff like that.
And talking heads, acting as though they're good faith arguments or based in reality. Effectively, she is re-gifting to her audience the same framework that is actively being used against people like her, except she's trying to cinch the frame a little tighter so she's not in the picture. The reality, again, very evident to most people in marginalized communities, is that Kamala and Biden left those marginalized communities out in the cold in the 2024 campaign. Another reason Brianna can't talk about the real reasons Kamala failed is that Kamala supported the overwhelmingly unpopular ongoing genocide in Gaza, something Brianna bloodthirstily supports. Let's talk about episode 1, where she brings up the Trump campaign ad that said Kamala is for they, them. She notes it's an example of conservatives conflating non-binary people, drag queens, and trans women. And instead of noting that conservatives are regarding them as one and the same, the reason that they're doing that, Brianna, is because they regard any queer identities of any stripe as the same, because it threatens their platform that's based on traditional stereotypes and heterosexuality. She proceeds to just talk about how trans women should separate from those ideas and abandon what should be their queer siblings. But Brianna, that won't matter to the people who are already lumping you in with them. I don't know, maybe it's her conservative roots finally showing through, but this trend of just repeating conservative talking points and agreeing with them uncritically is ever present. For example, in this same first episode, she says in the 90s, non-binary kids would be called goth.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I believe so strongly in transmedicalism. You know, I'm fully with you. Kids need to be able to play with gender. Like, we just used to call these kids goth back in the 90s, right? So, you know, I think that's beautiful. I love that. And I want every single kid to be able to do that. I think the problem is when we're so quick to medicalize this. Kelly, I've used the talking point that you gave last episode literally 3 times this week, talking to elected officials, where you were talking about how, like, when you think a lot of the people that start this, they just want to be able to talk about their feelings.
This is just repackaging the same tired social contagion talking points from TERFs who depict all trans teens.
Wait, please bring up the left-handed tweet. Dude, she's not gonna. I have to bring it up, dude. Brianna Wu put out the most legendary tweet about social contagion I've ever fucking seen. So I can't show you the whole tweet here because it's cut off. But it says, the start says, "The truth is, trans people insisted our medical safeguards be dismantled. Literally dismantled. Anyone could walk into a Planned Parenthood and transition this afternoon. So, our cohort hasn't changed. It's not extreme cases anymore. Now it's the marginal cases too." She goes on about just trans stuff. This is all about trans stuff, this tweet. And then someone replies, "Maybe I'm missing something obvious, but what's the connection between the content of the post and the graph on the prevalence of being left-handed?" You'll see here. There's the history of left-handedness before 1900, and then it lowers in the early 1900s, and it quickly raises and plateaus. There are two ways to read this chart. The way I do is the 3% of people that are actually left-handed. The rest of people are malleable to social pressure. So Brianna thinks that the lowest point on this graph in the early 1900s, this is the true rate of left-handedness. She thinks that's the true, this is the true prevalence of left-handedness. And this spike up to a plateau is because there is now a social pressure to be left-handed. It's just amazing. It's truly amazing. Yes, obviously anyone that doesn't know, it was seen as like evil and like demonic to be left-handed like 100 years ago. And so kids were like fucking beat and shit for it. And in the time since then, there have been accommodations made for people who are left-handed. We understood that it's not because you're possessed or something. And now the rate of left-handedness rests around 11-12%. Because we now accept left-handed people and make accommodations for them. It doesn't keep going up.
As vulnerable little babies with no higher cognitive abilities, which is fucking wild to hear, especially from someone who claims to have gone through so much turmoil to find themselves in their 20s like Brianna. Episode 3, she opens talking about Buck Angel. Brianna seems to cozy up to people who hate her or will just openly disrespect her because in her eyes, they'll quote-unquote have a conversation with you. Meanwhile, she seems to think the radical trans activists can't have a conversation, probably because she blocks anyone that challenges her. See, she can take pushback from conservatives, but when people actually want to talk with her from the left, she'd rather call them, again, degenerate weirdos.
I mean, you guys know my politics. I have a lot to criticize about trans activism, but when it comes down to it, I will fight with gender criticals. I mean, my mission is our dignity. And, you know, I go to war on that every single day. You know, and what I found when I talked to Buck is, yeah, he does have those tendencies to go down those paths. But, like, you can sit there and talk to him about, like, you know, access to children transitioning. Like, I have a view that there should be a small window open with extremely high.
Guys, key Stardust alert coming in here. Key Stardust alert coming in here. In fact, wait. We need to finish the video. I keep getting distracted. Finish the video first. No more ADHDing out.
And he will talk about that. And I don't know. I think that's to his credit. There was tons of stuff we disagreed on.
There are other tidbits throughout the various podcast episodes that some might find vaguely strange, like when she talks about being in a medically induced ketamine hole, and that led her on a spirit journey. Where
I will not take any advice on Ritalin or ADHD or any shit like that from Purple Parry Gaming. That will not be happening.
Was told she'd never be a woman. So apparently her inner woman is transphobic.
And it really changed my personality. You know, it's not a mistake that a lot of the arc I'm on right now is after I did that, because it did make me feel very fearless about what I want to do. But one of the things that clinical ketamine does is you're sitting there and tripping.
Oh, dude.
You're
going into the
K-hole, as I call it. And you really feel yourself stripped away. All these stories about yourself that you tell, all of it, it just gets taken apart one by one. And you're just staring there at the core of yourself. And this is so dark, but it's also really beautiful. That what I found at the core of myself repeatedly when I did that was this desire to be a woman. Like that fundamental thing that I want and cannot have, that's the essence of what I am. And I think that like leads to a melancholy and a pain that never leaves me ever. And, you know, as I've like come to this realization that transitioning early would not have cured that. Like, do y'all feel that too? Like this pain inside of you of always wanting to be something that you can never become?
Dude, what crazy story.
Somehow that actually makes a lot of sense for Brianna. Of all the insane claims Brianna has made, this is the one I actually have no problem believing. Another very telling incident was on episode 4 of the Dollcast, where in the first 2 minutes, Brianna talks about being in Boston.
I think Brianna would say she's not a woman. Yeah, she would say she's a trans woman. I think that's totally reasonable. I think that's kind of true. unfortunately. I know trans people don't want to hear that. But I think redefining women to mean anyone who identifies as a woman instead of just being adult human female is a total mistake, and you will always get baited into looking like a retard if you accept that definition. People just insane. If you're a trans woman, you're a trans woman.
Being sad about Trump winning, and on a whim, taking a vacation to Disney World in Florida with her husband, which is an insane concept to me. Like, I don't know exactly how wealthy Brianna is, but the idea of simply taking days off, flying down and going to Disney World on a whim, that kind of capital is mind-boggling. I'll end our time looking at Brianna's podcast with this diatribe she goes on about how the trans community has failed to police its bad actors. And at least she actually believes that, as we have plenty of evidence that Brianna took that policing personally, as she's the one who's trying to do the policing in those DMs, remember?
Well, no, so this is like a retarded game that's been played here, right? Woman is a gender, not a sex. That's not really true. Woman is a word that has different definitions in different contexts. If you're talking about gender, then yeah, woman is about the like concept of being a woman and what that entails in society. But if you're talking about what is the definition of woman, well, that's an adult human female. Well, that's the way it's used. Is a girl is a child female, and a woman is an adult female. That's how we use the words.
Fine, Lib. I think to play devil's advocate for just a minute, would the three of you not agree with me? The trans community has completely failed to police our bad actors. Like, we have just sat here silently as is expanded and expanded and expanded, and you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and any kind of medical safeguarding.
That is how 90% of people use the term adult human female. That is absolutely how 90% of people define the term woman. There is like a small sect of very progressive people that would say, well, anyone can be a woman. You just about how you identify. But most people would say it is an adult human female. You check people's chromosomes, decide what's in their pants, decide how to treat people. No, I take one look at them and it tells me with 99% accuracy what the truth of those is.
Oppression, and it's really unsurprising to me why the trans movement,
more than 99%,
largely because people
probably
like me just stayed silent and didn't make a big deal out of being trans, like has grown to this place where you do have people with beards going into bathrooms and filming videos about it now. I mean, don't you think like we are somewhat responsible for this mess we're in?
But Brianna, the lying, manipulating, spotlight stealing, backstabbing, blame shifting, political renegade with no wins to speak of, she's the one we should be listening to. Okay. So how has this attempt to establish herself as a more measured voice for trans women actually fared? Well, judging by the number of appearances she gets on more conservative shows like Tim Pool or Trigonometry and others, pretty successful, I guess, for her, she seems to relish being the token trans woman they can get to come on and repeat the things, again, they already believe. But she calls herself a Democrat. She doesn't like Trump, so somehow she's taking part in some grand
I have been pro-trans, okay? I'm still kind of pro-trans. I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm anti-trans. I don't hate trans people for the crime of existing, But it's weird to define yourself as anti-trans. That is a strange position to take. I've been more pro-trans than I am now. I have been... Actually, a woman is just anyone who identifies as a woman. I've been there. It's dumb. You will never convince anyone on that. It's not how people use the terms. Can identify with 99.99% accuracy which category someone falls into with a single glance, and past that, if they speak, you will know 100% of the time. It's ridiculous to suggest that there is some esoteric version of gender that people are using, where that accidentally people who just identify as women are slipping into the category of woman. No, that woman is used, and if you say someone is a woman in conversation, what someone takes that to mean is that they are an adult, human, female, every time. Tiny amount of people, mainly like academia and online, that would say otherwise. But you speak to anyone out in the world, they will not have a gender theory view on the meaning of woman. They will have a very simple biological view on the meaning of woman.
Range of ideas in the marketplace and having the tough conversations that need to be had. In 2024, Brianna would pivot almost entirely to argue for what she thinks are trans rights, which for her actually means excluding large parts of the trans community, as we've already gathered.
It's not esoteric, it's a societal role. You're making like, it's like a complete... this is coming from such a... this is like an astroturfing of the argument that happens in a very stupid way. People take the gender theory definition of woman and they say, that is how it's used. No, it's not. That is a definition of woman. That is the definition you use. That is the definition you want other people to use. But it is actually quite a niche definition that is used mainly in academia and progressive circles. It isn't used out broadly in the world. When people think of gender expression, they don't think of that being the category in which someone falls into. They just think of, oh, well, you know, sometimes women like pink, but sometimes they don't, I guess. That's all they think of. They don't think of this idea, this gender theory construct of, oh, there is the role of woman and the role of man as dictated in society. That's not how people look at it at all.
Barry Weiss sums up Brianna well in the introductory paragraph of an interview piece that comes across far more cutting than I think Brianna intended. Quote, "There's no one quite like Brianna Wu. She's a trans woman who advocates passionately for trans healthcare, but also thinks many trans activists have lost the plot and are alienating women and feminists."
That's the correct definition of woman. Where are you getting that idea from? How are you determining that's the correct definition of woman? Please tell me. Please expand on that. How are you determining that the correct definition of woman is one that comes from gender theory that relies on social roles as opposed to biology? Where are you getting that from? Please inform me. I would love to know. Where does it say? Where is it written that that is the correct definition of woman? Because when I search define woman on Google, it says an adult female human being. That's what it says when I type define woman on Google. Well, what word would you use to describe the category of social... Okay, we're not talking about the word gender. We're talking about the word woman. I agree the word gender is obviously... That is defined in terms of like theory and expression, basically. People use it as a synonym for sex. But that is incorrect. Just because, well, not even incorrect. It's just like that. It's not there's a correct or incorrect there. Obviously, there isn't with definitions. But the reality is that it uses utility. It loses utility if you just use it in the same way as sex every time. It's not, because they are different things. They are different concepts. Yes, the word woman comes before the theory of gender, right? No, I'm not. Cheddy, explain to me. Okay, Cheddy, you taking the argument. Tell me, you're taking the position right now that the correct definition of woman is one that relates to gender and not sex. You're saying that right now. That's your argument. Yes or no? Okay, so why, when I search define woman, when I look in a dictionary, does it say an adult female human being? What does that have to do with gender? How is that tied to gender and not sex? That seems definitively tied to sex. How are you determining that definition is incorrect? Yeah, I'm making the argument that it won't and shouldn't change. Not even sure. I don't even care if it does. To be honest. I wouldn't care if the definition of woman changed. To be honest, I have an attachment to the word, but it won't change, and you shouldn't attempt to because you will look stupid. It's like trying to change like the definition of, like, I don't know, hand. See, you're just totally wrong, Cheddy H, and you're just showing that you know nothing about linguistics or philosophy or anything. Like, you're like outing yourself as so fucking stupid right now. Holy shit. Because dictionary definition based on colloquial usage, not always quote-unquote correct category-wise. All definitions, all words, necessarily require coming together and agreeing upon a definition, because it is all about its communication. It requires people coming together and agreeing on a definition. So if everyone agrees, except for you, on what the definition of a word is, say, woman, 99% of people are like, woman means adult human female. It's tied to sex. And then you just go, no, woman's about gender. No, woman's about gender. How are you saying that you are correct? What word would I use? What word would I use for what, retard? What are you asking right now? Describe the gender category contained within woman. Well, yeah, words have different meanings, different contexts. If you are discussing gender theory and you talk about what it means to be a woman, then yes, you can safely assume that in that context, you're using the definition that relates to gender. However, when people use the word woman, as I said 5 minutes ago, when people use the word woman, when someone asks, what is a woman? They are asking you, what is your definition of woman, generally? And it is adult human female for 99% of people in 99% of contexts. Only when discussing gender roles, specifically, gender theory, specifically, will people talk in definition, broadly will people talk. Obviously, some people talk about women in this way all the time. But broadly, only then will people talk about the idea of woman as a gender. Because there isn't a correct definition. Definitions come from agreements between people broadly about how to use a word in a certain context. That's just not true. People don't see a trans guy passes and go, that's a woman. I mean, lots of people do, actually. They will still say that they're a woman. Or they'll say they're male. They'll say they're female, but they present as a man. Something like that.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the best politicians in America, but is also a staunch supporter of Israel. She was a victim of an alt-right cyber attack during the Gamergate scandal, but now thinks that the far left has become just like that mob. She's a feminist who has argued for more female representation.
The last thing you said is exactly my point. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because they don't say they are a man. They say they present as. They are a male who presents, they're a female who presents as. They don't say they are a man. They say they're a female who presents as.
In the gaming industry, but believes that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have gone way too far.
This is the point, right? They're saying they take on the appearance of.
If you didn't know everything we've talked about in regards to Brianna, this seems like just a compelling portrait of a beleaguered political moderate, but in context, it kind of just lays out how Brianna has slithered her way through various positions that benefit her. See, Brianna hasn't just spent the last year repeating insane talking points with no credibility or evidence. She's continued to try and use those talking points to cozy up with notable members of the right-wing media ecosystem. The best she's managed so far has been showing off her Porsche collection to Lauren Southern and a chat on Tim Pool's show where they talked about Tim's favorite autistic hyperfixation, Civil War. There's her appearance on Trigonometry, which is apparently a real name people chose to represent themselves and the brand they live by. Trigonometry is apparently a podcast hosted by British Ozempic Ben Shapiro and a horse what they done put a wig and glasses on. I realize I try to go by a rule not to insult people based on their appearances, but that is unfortunately superseded by my other main rule, no mercy for the British. This interview is a perfect showcase of how Brianna is turning herself into a token for conservatives, someone who is utterly unchallenging and will acquiesce to whatever they say, but gives them the ability to literally virtue signal to show how reasonable and rational they are for being open-minded enough to have a trans activist on.
Anglophobia is just allowed. It's so fucked up. Anglophobia, it's just so fucked, man. Anglophobia is allowed. You guys wanted the song again? I've still got that open.
So I don't see this as a conservative versus not conservative issue. This to me is It's like it's a mind virus, this stuff. It really is.
I think you're right. It's not necessarily political. I don't know whether an army should reflect society.
I don't give a shit if it reflects society. I don't care. I want the army to be good at doing its job. Why does every institution have to be a tool of...
What am I doing on this show?
Social engineering, effectively, right?
What is my purpose here? Does anybody know? What have I to offer? What's inside my head? Should I be listening to what that other bloke just said? What should I say? I'm at a loss. If I start talking now, will Constantine be cross? Or having to read the news or studied any books? Constantine's the brains of this, so I must be the looks. I know that there will come a day when I will come up with a clever thing to say, and when I say it, everyone will know what I am doing on this show.
Sorry, Francis. I just to follow up on that. We, as far as I mean, I didn't know you had this here. I don't know if we have in the UK. We did have some kind of show.
Oh, good man.
Which starts by her
a
repeating her talking point about how the Dems are losing because they follow DEI and identity politics.
I went 20 years without talking about being trans as part of my public profile. I just never wanted it to be what my career is about. But the truth is, you look at these nut jobs that are driving our civil rights right now, I really worry if someone does not stand up and go, we've got to get this movement back to sanity, back to some public policy that people can agree with. I'm terrified about what's going to happen. There's a message you can give people, which is, look, this is my body, my life. I'm going to take this medication. I will accept the responsibility myself. Just let me go make my own choices. People are on board with that. Mm-hmm. They are not on board with, we're going to announce our pronouns when we meet each other, and if you screw that up, you're going to be socially ostracized.
Yeah, see, she thinks that the Democrats lost the election because they were too radical, which is the level of expert political analysis we can count on her for. Wonder why she was never elected. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the fact that, no, the Dems kept trying to reach out to the Republicans while the actual populist movement was just left out in the cold. No, yeah, great. Good job, Brianna.
I think there's an appetite in the Democratic Party right now in this moment to finally kick out the communists. I really do. I think there's an appetite to get rid of these people that have the same project as theocratic Islam. I think there's I really do think there's an attitude where we're going to be willing to get rid of our worst actors, including this fringe trans stuff, no matter what happens.
Yeah,
there's like, okay, I literally, this talking point is so fucking just like dumb. Like, it's like allowing, and Babka corrected me on this term, the narcissism of small differences to just completely dictate your entire political messaging, basically. Where, like, truly, like, they aren't fucking, like, I understand people want to pretend this is the case, but broadly, pro-Palestine people are not pro-jihad, like, jihadist. They don't want, like, jihad. They don't want, like, holy war. They want that country free. They want it to be built up into a secular democracy, ideally. That's what they're thinking, really. They're not, like, jihadists. They don't think, they're not working on a jihadist project, like Brianna seems to think, like some people seem to think is the case. With the communist people, most of them are not like, we need a revolution now. Most of them are not like, we need to kneecap every sort of like liberal or social democratic effort to make things better in the short term. Most of them are like, in many years, maybe we'll get there. For now, I'm advocating for the workers and the people and all that shit. So, I understand there is, yes, you should push out bad actors who are kneecapping the party for the sake of their own retarded ideological goals. Those people absolutely can go, and that's what Keir did in the UK. It was any of the Labour people that were seriously like breaking rank and causing fucking problems. They got fucked. But if you're willing to play the game, you can feel whatever way you want, you know. And that's the way it should be. Play the game, play the electoralism game, try and make stuff good in the short term, and have whatever fucking long-term ideological goals you want, and we can work together on shit. That should be how it's done. But for some reason, Brianna, Erudite, this little cabal of people who fucking hate Hassan, and literally just everything they do is focused around how much they hate Hassan, are just like obsessed with this idea that anyone that has any commie leaning or pro-Gaza leaning needs to be gone from the Dems. It's just so stupid and self-defeating. You're just like alienating, like you're creating this retarded polarization between people that could otherwise work together on solutions, right? Like, what is the point in that?
Brianna's hatred for theocratic Islam is, well, she's very careful to preface it with being theocratic Islam. But again, if you remember her long history of anti-Arab racism, and you factor in her frankly insane genocide support, it kind of just seems like she hates brown people in a very Ben Shapiro bloodlusty kind of way.
True.
And Israel, it's so disappointing to me that Israel in the last 3 months has taken out the world's trash for it. You know, they've taken out Hamas, they've hurt Hezbollah, they've gone after the IRGC.
Oh, that's such a crazy thing to say.
And Israel, it's so disappointing to me that Israel in the last 3 months has taken out the world's trash for it. You know, they've taken out Hamas, they've hurt Hezbollah, they've gone after the IRGC. And, you know, you would think Biden would be like, thank you, Israel.
This isn't like, this is like, oh yeah, Israel's taking out the world's trash. It's the sort of thing I would say to be like deliberately abrasive and horrible to pro-Palestine people, demeaning their deaths in a deliberate effort to cause an emotional response. Like it would be like, yeah, it's like a humorous prodding of someone that's annoying me at the time. Brianna says this is legitimate political analysis.
Well done. We've been trying to kill that guy for 20 years behind the Marine barracks bombing. Instead, it's wagging our finger.
And for somebody who constantly is talking about how we need nuance in politics, she has no problem fear-mongering about Hamas having taken over mass mobilized marches even days after the world watched IDF soldiers slaughter medical non-combatants on video. But that to her, oh, that's nobody cares. Yeah, Zionism is the other major hyperfixation for Brianna. At every turn, she seems to support literally any measure taken against not just terrorists, but anyone who might even be the same skin color or profess support for children and citizens not dying. Like, for example, support of a Muslim ban.
And just naturally, as someone that's on the left, like Muslim ban, discriminating against someone on the basis of religion, this is a bad idea. But so much of what I've thought about post-October 7th is if you look at the countries that this ban, which came from Obama, you know, it's like these
She's repeating the Obama line. Dude, what? Dude, she's actually running conservative propaganda. What? What was it? It was like a list that was drawn up of like high-risk countries. It wasn't a list that was drawn up to be banned from entering. Yet that's how they present it when they talk. Dude, it's so crazy.
Countries with people that have some really dangerous ideology that is a threat to American citizens. At the very least, we've got to aggressively vet the people we're letting in.
The Goats mini stream has ended, so I'm back here. Pensive face emoji.
Is she
shrimp
gone?
emoji.
Is she gone? Is she gone? Is it over? Chat is very divided between people smoking that Gorgura pack and people commiserating.
In to make sure they are not going to start their own Amsterdam incident here in this country. So
Dude, what?
Citizens, at the very least, we've got to aggressively vet the people we are letting in to make sure they are not going to start their own Amsterdam incident here in this country. So I'm so much more.
Dude, what?
I think that October 7th lifted the illusions from a lot of people's eyes across the right and the left. And I think we're going to see those kinds of issues grappled with more honestly this time.
The Amsterdam thing where the football teams were like being racist to each other and then the Muslims assaulted the Israelis or whatever.
Yes, what a Brianna, just a principled Democrat saying the fascist president is right for trying to not let.
No, I don't think they were beating the Arab. I don't know if that was shown. I think what happened was basically the Israelis, that Israeli football team, I can't remember which one it is. It begins with an M, I think, is very well known for being exceedingly racist, their supporters. And they were chanting about, like, how happy they were for kids to be dying in Gaza and all that sort of shit, I think. And then they got assaulted outside, I believe.
Of certain skin color into the...
It's because they chanting and beat up a taxi driver. I don't know about beating up a taxi driver. I haven't heard that. If that's true, that might be true. That might be true.
Country. Just a brilliant political mind. If you want a real look into how little Brianna seems to know about the Gaza genocide, or more accurately, how much she willfully ignores, look no further than her interview with Mark Lamont Hill, which was an absolute embarrassment for her, to say the least.
Most of the pro-Palestine movement are not Islamists. And
Gaza itself is an Islamist. Like, it operates under Sharia law, yes?
We're talking about a movement, right? I'm assuming the people that you are getting comments from are not in Gaza, right? We're talking about the pro-Palestine movement. You're talking about people, for example, who are commenting from our exchange. Those people aren't in Gaza. The pro-Palestinian movement is a global movement. And most of the people who are pro-Palestinian aren't even Muslim, much less Islamists. Second, you can be Muslim and not be Islamist.
Yes, yes.
And so,
this is Mark Lamont Hill.
Much of even historic Palestine, and I don't mean historically, I mean like much of the region right now, most Palestinians are Muslim, but most don't live in Gaza. And most of those people would not identify as Islamists based on all the polls, based on all the data.
Really, you don't think Free Palestine at its core is
an Islamist movement?
I absolutely think that.
What?
Dude, what? No, like, as in, she's saying it's like an Islamist movement. Like, the way I see Islamist is wanting, like, Sharia law, wanting Islamic states, wanting... Like, it's like almost the other end of Zionism, you know? That's how I see Islamism. Yeah, speaking to establish Islam as a widespread governing force, yeah. I don't think that's what Free Palestine is. It's cool. Most, like this guy's saying, most people who are like Free Palestine aren't even fucking Muslim. They're like libs. They're libs and lefties and shit. Yeah, exactly. Like, they're mocked because it's like, well, these people go completely against your values, right? The values you want, these people don't believe in, yet you're advocating them for them anyway. It's not an Islamist movement at its core. It's advocating for this people in spite of the risk of Islamism, if you know what I mean. They have like there is like a risk in seeking to establish like a Gaza state or something that becomes like some Islamist state and like, or whatever. But you advocate for them and their sovereignty and their right to self-determination in spite of that risk. Because you believe in the fundamental right they have to, you know, live safe lives where they're able to self-determine.
What does Islamist mean to you?
This project to conflate Islam with the state and to usher that into a form of government.
She basically shrugs at the idea of kids being targeted and killed, kind of just saying, well, them's the breaks in war.
Every piece of the built environment nearly of Gaza has been reduced to rubble. I mean, it's at least at 80%. Now, every school has been destroyed. 80%.
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible looking at the pictures, yeah.
But we also see the killing of doctors. We see the killing of journalists. We see the killing of educators.
It's really easy to say child killed, you know, all of this. There are a tremendous number of child soldiers that are working alongside PIJ, you know, militants, working alongside Hamas. They're trained with weapons. It's horrible. Hamas is committing a war crime by using child soldiers, and that is a non-trivial number of those deaths. It's just an absolute fact. As far as, you know, some of this technology of white phosphorus and all of that, I think those claims are really overblown.
Also need to bring up this wonderful chef's kiss of a moment where she says Kamala won't be affected by her support for Israel. I wonder why Brianna doesn't have a job at Rebellion PAC anymore.
Yeah, I think the fact that it doesn't look like the DNC is going to result in Chicago on fire, I feel really good about us just being able to kind of continue through the election.
And if that is the case, if what you prognosticate is accurate.
Yes.
And I suspect it is.
Is that a word? I feel like I've heard people do this before. Prognosticate. Okay. Prognosticate, I think he means prognosticate, not prognosticate. But yeah, close.
Does Kamala Harris win?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be surprising then that, like her purposefully misunderstanding non-binary people,
so racist.
For her to villainize them. And
why you say I'm racist? What was racist there? I didn't do anything racist there at all. I don't know why you would accuse me of being racist there. I wasn't thinking anything racist. I was not thinking anything like black people always be doing this shit. Black people just making up words and shit. I am racist. I'm racist. I've said before, I am emotionally racist. Okay, I am. I do not try to let it affect my thinking, but I know I'm emotionally racist. I have racism inside me.
Valorize her very smart and centrist positions. Brianna doesn't really care how much evidence of a genocide she's presented with. She has continually advocated for basically the entire total ethnic extermination of Gazans. And like most of the rabid Zionists, will fall back on tired arguments like Israel has a right to exist and Palestinian protesters are terrorist sympathizers, when really the only thing anyone is advocating for that she is against is Israel stopping the mass slaughter of women, children, and non-combatants. That's it. Again, this is the person who wants to present herself as a voice of reason, who knows what she's talking about. Her Zionist position might be the clearest example, but we've seen plenty how she just absolutely ignores any evidence or conversations that...
Dude.
that she is against is Israel stopping the mass slaughter of women, children, and non-combatants. That's it. Again, this is the person who wants to present herself as a voice of reason, who knows what she's talking about. Her Zionist
she's fine with these deportations too.
Might be the clearest example, but we've seen plenty how she just absolutely ignores any evidence or conversations that might actually disprove or...
Guys, now is a great time to remind you, if you're one of the 330 people who haven't already liked the stream, please move your cursor to the thumbs up and click it. Or press the thumbs up on your mobile device. That'd be hugely appreciated. If you want to take your support one step further, you can donate directly. There's a stream moments link in the pinned chat message. You also buy a membership to the channel, gift a membership to the channel, gift a whole bunch of memberships randomly throughout the chat, buy a super chat, which will highlight your message and read it on TTS, or buy a super sticker, which is a YouTube image or GIF that will be highlighted in chat, and I'll describe it to you. You go to discord.gg/Kuihman, twitter.com/Kuihman, or reddit.com/r/Kuihman. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, you can now watch on twitch.tv/Kuihman if you so choose.
Challenge her in any way. It's legitimately sickening to watch. Like her open praising of Mahmoud Khalil's DHS arrest, where she's been justifying the...
Yo, thank you for the $1.99 hoodie. Thank you.
extrajudicial targeting of a legal immigrant because he advocated for the rights of suffering and dying people. But to her, these positions aren't extreme. Oh no. The extremists are the people who want a ceasefire. Now, if you've heard some of the things Brianna says about communists, it's very clear that much like non-binary representation and just a larger queer community in general, she has no idea what the fuck she's talking about. Could her lack of knowledge with these positions have anything to do with not ever talking to leftists and getting most of her ideas, or at least approaches, from mainstream conservatism? Who's to say?
This is what drives me crazy about this current trans movement. You know, when I transitioned over 20 years ago, the message was, your fate is in your own hands, right? If you pass, that's up to you. If you're employed, that's up to you. You have to learn these skills so you can build a good life for yourself. That's the way it was for a long time. Instead, the trans movement has taken on this victimhood. And I'm opposed to it, not just because it's politically cowardly, but it is taking an entire generation of girls that are just like me and telling them the thing that isn't gonna, the thing
girls
you're
just like
waiting
you
for to make your life better is a communist utopia.
Like how do I even approach this idea that trans girls are indoctrinated into a communist utopia? What does communism have to do with defining concepts of gender? We could honestly be here all day watching her flap her overly thin lips, arguing total nonsense, but I really don't think it's necessary. Skip through any podcast appearance she makes or talking head segment she somehow managed to finagle. You'll see this highly qualified politico stumbling through the same lukewarm takes we've heard dozens of times with no substance behind them. But it is catching up with her. She can only be insulated by money and what connections she actually has for so long. Now, Brianna spends her days arguing online, in her own mind besieged as one of the last holdouts of true transness with other people she now apparently calls comrades like Blair White. Recently, she claimed to have a debate with Blair because she's got nothing left to generate views except causing tired controversies. But here's how that debate went.
I agreed with you. I 100% agreed with you.
Oh, what the? Dude, Blair White looks crazy now.
Right.
What the? Dude, what the?
I 100% agreed with you. To the kids' point that you brought up, Blair, I really feel you. I do want to agree with you.
I don't think she was that crazy, did she?
Because I think, Blair, what you said about children growing out of it's very true. You're talking like there's a ton of surgery on children, and I fully agree with you for these
Chinese.
You said something at the beginning about children.
Here's what you would look like if you were black and Chinese.
Out of it's very true. You're talking like there's a ton of surgery on children, and I fully agree with you for these FTMs. You said something at the beginning of this, which is trans women we've been run out of our own movement, which is 100% true. This non-binary fringe has come into it, and to use Free Palestine's phrase, they've colonized us.
Yeah, I agree. Just to, expand slightly and then we can move on, is like, I completely agree. It's like,
here we are. We're two trans women that feel like our civil rights vehicle has been hijacked by lunatics. How do we, trans women, actual trans women, not pretend trans women, not non-binaries, how do we build something where we can have a say in our own healthcare again?
She may have found new friends, or at least people willing to use her as much as she uses them for exposure and clout. But like I said at the beginning, Brianna doesn't have a community. And if the trends in her behavior, both in front and behind the scenes, are anything to go by, she'd talk shit about literally any of them in a group chat the second she thought it might get her more popularity with someone with a slightly larger audience. So it's not surprising that most of her time seems to be spent arguing on social media with accounts like me. I think the point I really decided to make this video was shortly before Brianna blocked me, where she said non-binary people aren't trans, to which I responded, I'm transgender, I'm non-binary, I go through trans healthcare, I get electrolysis, I've been on hormones for years. To which she responded by saying, I'm not non-binary, I'm transsexual. Brianna, you can call yourself whatever you want, but your problem is that because you think you've come to know yourself and realized your gender journey, you think you can speak for everyone else, and you make no effort to understand others.
Soy ending.
And that's always been true. don't let her inability to see the world from a less privileged perspective, her lack of any kind of empathy for the struggles of someone else, distract you from the fact that first and foremost, Brianna Wu is an opportunistic, manipulative liar. She shouldn't be trusted, not because she never knows what she's talking about, but because she will say whatever she thinks you want to hear if it will get you to support her and get her a little bit more visibility. And after examining her entire career, it doesn't seem like there was some grand transformation over time. From the very beginning,
I think my ending was better.
And her work
I think
on
my
an
video
animation
ended better.
studio that crashed, her career has been defined by an abundance of unearned confidence, manipulation, volatility, and a lack of any consequences. So maybe this video will do nothing. Maybe it's just preaching to more of the choir who already have her blocked on Blue Sky, but I'm honestly okay with that. If, on the other hand, Brianna were to lose her power and influence, it should be seen as due rewards for her history of lying and coercion. If she has no friends or no political career because she is finally seen by all as the corrosive, toxic person she is, I'd have no problem with that. And even if all of that were to happen, she'd be fine because she's fucking rich. But regardless how any of these things behind the scene coming to light affects her, I can say one thing with certainty. In the end, Brianna won't have anyone left to stand up for her. She won't have anyone left to bring her on podcasts and pay her for being a consultant, at least not if she continues the way she has for decades. And that has nothing to do with a YouTuber compiling a deep dive. It's all by her hand. Goodwill is not an unlimited resource, and Brianna has stripped the mountains of her career dry of any goodwill she managed to wring from Gamergate, from her political career, and from what sparse experience she actually has. So in the end, if Brianna Wu ends up alone, isolated, and hollow, it's not because of the rest of the world. It's because it's what she's always been building towards through her own actions.
Wow. What an awesome video. What a great video.